Hello friends. Welcome to the Saiyan What Ifs. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Goku trained under Bardock on Vegeta. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. The Seer's Gambit. Blood dripped from Bardock's brow as he staggered through the corridor of his assault pod. The screams of the Connaissance still echoing in his mind. Not their death cries. He'd heard plenty of those in his years as a Saiyan warrior, but their final, damning gift. The visions. The curse of sight that now plagued him with images he couldn't unsee. Planet Vegeta erupting in a blinding flash, his people reduced to cosmic dust, Frieza's laughter cutting through the vacuum of space. The med bay door hissed open. His mate Jine looked up, her gentle features, so unusual for a Saiyan, hardening at the sight of his wounds. Another successful conquest, she asked, reaching for a regeneration patch. Bardock grabbed her wrist, his eyes wild. Where is he? Where's Kakarot? In the incubation chamber, where he belongs. Bardock, you're burning up. They showed me things, Jine. His voice dropped to a ragged whisper. The Connaissance. Before I killed the last of them, their leader touched my mind. He showed me our end. In the sterile glow of the medical lights, Jine's expression shifted from concern to fear. Among Saiyans, fear was a shameful emotion, but between mates, between Bardock and Jine, there had always been space for truth. What are you talking about? Frieza plans to destroy our planet. All of us. I saw it happen. Bardock released her wrist and pressed his palm against the wall to steady himself. And Kakarot, he's scheduled for dispatch to some backwater planet called Earth. Tomorrow. Jine stepped back. That's impossible. Why would Lord Frieza? He fears us. Bardock's laugh held no humor. The mighty Frieza, terror of the galaxy, fears what Saiyans might become. The revelation hung in the recycled air between them, too monstrous to immediately accept, too specific to dismiss. In the silence that followed, the soft beeping of the medical equipment seemed suddenly ominous. If what you saw is true, Jine finally said, her practical nature asserting itself, then we need to leave. Take Raditz from his assignment. Grab Kakarot. Find somewhere. No. Bardock straightened, something dangerous flickering behind his eyes. Running isn't the answer. The visions showed me more than our destruction. They showed me possibilities. He moved Tawa, rode the window overlooking the incubation chamber, where rows of Saiyan infants floated in nutrient-rich fluid. Among them was Kakarot, their second-born son, his tiny tail curling and uncurling in unconscious movements. Our boy is special, Jine. In another life, the one where we send him away, he becomes something extraordinary. A warrior who surpasses even the elites. But he grows up without knowing his heritage, without understanding what it means to be Saiyan. Jine joined him at the window. Then we should go with him. And confirm Frieza's suspicions that we know his plans. He'd hunt us across the galaxy. Bardock's reflection in the glass looked older, the lines of his face deeper than they'd been before the mission. No, we stay. We play our parts. But we change the script. How? Bardock's lips curved into the predatory smile that had made him legendary among the third-class warriors. Frieza thinks he understands Saiyans. He believes we're just bloodthirsty animals he can control. But we're hunters, Jine. Patient when we need to be. And I'm going to teach our son to hunt the most dangerous prey of all. He pressed his palm against the glass. Below, as if sensing his father's presence, baby Kakarot's eyes opened. 5 years passed in the shadow of Bardock's visions. 5 years of careful planning, of subtle resistance disguised as loyalty. Planet Vegeta continued its uneasy existence under Frieza's rule, with most Saiyans unaware of how close they had come to annihilation. Only a select few knew fragments of the truth, Bardock's most trusted squad members. A handful of scientists who could be bribed or coerced, and King Vegeta himself, though the monarch received a carefully edited version that appealed to his pride. In these 5 years, young Ot grew from a mewling infant to a Saiyan child with an unusual temperament that both concerned and intrigued his father. He's smiling again, Raditz complained, watching his younger brother chase a small native reptile through the rocky terrain behind their dwelling. At 12 years old, Raditz already embodied many of the expected Saiyan traits: aggression, pride, competitive drive, that made high A promising warrior despite his third-class status. What's wrong with him? Bardock studied his younger son thoughtfully. Kakarot had indeed been smiling, his face bright with genuine delight as he tracked the skittering creature. Not the arrogant smirk of a Saiyan warrior anticipating battle, but something purer. Something that, in most Saiyan circles, would be considered weak. Nothing's wrong with him, Bardock said firmly. He hunts differently than you, that's all. Raditz snorted. He's not hunting. He's playing. Like a soft-hearted fool. Before Bardock could respond, Kakarot pounced with startling speed. His small hands capturing the reptile with surgical precision. Rather than crushing the creature, as most Saiyan children would, he examined it with intense curiosity before gently placing it in a small container he'd brought along specifically for this purpose. Caught another one, he announced proudly, trotting back to show his family. This one's faster than yesterday's. I had to change my approach 3 times. Bardock exchanged a meaningful look with Jine, who had emerged from their dwelling with a haunch of meat for their evening meal. This was what set Kakarot apart, not weakness, but adaptability. While other Saiyan children relied on brute force and inherited techniques, Kakarot analyzed, adjusted, and improvised. See how its tail curves. Kakarot was explaining to his disinterested brother. That changes its balance point. If you watch carefully before attacking. Who cares? Raditz interrupted. It's a stupid lizard. Just crush it and be done. But then I wouldn't learn anything. Kakarot protested, genuinely confused. Bardock suppressed a rare smile. In the alternative future he'd glimpsed, the one where Kakarot grew up on Earth as Goku. This innate curiosity had helped him become a fighter who constantly evolved beyond his opponent's expectations. Here on planet Vegeta, surrounded by Saiyan culture that prized power over innovation, this quality needed protection and nurturing. Enough about lizards, Bardock interrupted. Kakarot, it's time for your special training. The boy's face lit up, his tail swishing with excitement. Combat drills. Something different today. Bardock glanced at the darkening sky. Come with me. As they walked away from the family dwelling toward the barren highlands, Raditz called after them, Can I come too? Bardock didn't look back. Not today. Your assignment with Commander Nappa begins at dawn. Rest while you can. He heard Raditz kick at the rocky ground but didn't relent. The training sessions with Kakarot needed to remain private, away from the prying scouters and surveillance that Frieza's forces maintained throughout the main settlements. What he was teaching his younger son went beyond standard Saiyan battle techniques. It was preparing him for a rebellion that might take decades to cultivate. When they reached a secluded plateau overlooking the crimson Wastellan that characterized much of planet Vegeta's harsh landscape, Bardock stopped and sat cross-legged on the ground. Sit, he commanded, and Kakarot obeyed immediately, mirroring his father's posture. Are we going to meditate again? The boy asked, trying to conceal his disappointment. Like most Saiyan children, he preferred active training to mental exercises. Yes, Bardock confirmed, but a purpose you'll appreciate soon enough. Close your eyes. Kakarot complied, his small face scrunching with effort to maintain stillness. In the fading light, with his wild black hair tousled by warm winds that swept across the highlands, he looked remarkably like Bardock, but the softness around his eyes, the absence of battle scars, and the occasional unconscious smile that played at his lips even in concentration revealed Jine's influence. What do you feel? Bardock asked after several minutes of silence. The wind, Kakarot answered promptly. And my heartbeat. And I'm hungry. Deeper, Bardock instructed. Like we practiced. Feel the energy flowing through you. Through everything around you. The boy's brow furrowed with increased concentration. Unlike most Saiyan training, which focused on hardening the body and mastering destructive techniques, Bardock had been teaching his son to sense and manipulate ki in ways that weren't commonly practiced on planet Vegeta. The Saiyans relied heavily on scouters, technology provided by Frieza's empire, to detect power levels and locate opponents. True ki sensing was considered an unnecessary skill when technology could do the work for you. But Bardock knew better. In his visions, he'd seen Kakarot and other warriors fighting without scouters, reading and responding to energy fluctuations with instinctive precision. More importantly, he'd seen how this skill allowed them to conceal their true power, something that would be essential in the years to come. I feel, Something, Kakarot said hesitantly. Like tiny sparks everywhere. In the ground. In the air. His eyes remained closed, but his expression shifted to wonder. And something bigger, far away. Many somethings. Are those people? Bardock nodded, though his son couldn't see it. Yes, you're sensing the settlement. Each spark is a life, a power signature. Yours is different, Kakarot observed, his head tilting slightly toward his father. It feels controlled, tight, like you're holding something back. A flicker of pride warmed Bardock's chest. The boy was progressing faster than expected. That's exactly right, and that's what we're going to practice today, controlling your energy so that others can't sense your true strength. Kakarot's eyes snapped open. Like hiding, like hunting, Bardock corrected, recognizing the Saiyan distaste for anything that seemed cowardly. The most dangerous predators conceal themselves until the perfect moment to strike. This reframing satisfied the boy's Saiyan pride. So I could be stronger than someone thinks. And then surprise them in battle. Precisely. And more importantly, you can appear weaker than you truly are, which makes enemies underestimate you. Bardock reached out and placed a calloused hand on his son's small shoulder. This skill will keep you alive, Kakarot. Frieza's forces depend on scouter readings to identify threats. If you can control how your power appears to their technology, you control how they perceive you. Kakarot nodded solemnly, though Bardock suspected he didn't fully grasp the political implications. That was fine. Understanding would come with time. For now, instilling the technical skills was enough. Now, I want you to focus on pulling your energy inward, Bardock instructed. Imagine your power as a flame. Don't extinguish it. Just shelter it, contain it, so that only a small glow is visible from the outside. As the twin sons of planet Vegeta sank below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plateau, father and son continued their clandestine training. In the distance, the lights of the capital city began to illuminate the gathering darkness, evidence of the civilization Bardock was secretly preparing to save, one carefully taught lesson at a time. 6 months later, Kakarot found himself in the central training complex of the capital city, surrounded by other Saiyan children his age. Unlike the personalized instruction he received from his father, these standardized combat sessions were mandatory for all young Saiyans, regardless of class or potential. They served both as training and as early assessment, a way F. Are Frieza's administrators to categorize the next generation of warriors for appropriate assignments. The training hall echoed with the sounds of small bodies colliding, juvenile battle cries, and occasional reprimand from adult supervisors. Kakarot stood in a line with 5 other children, awaiting their turn at the combat simulator. Despite his father's warnings to moderate his performance in public, excitement bubbled in his chest. He'd never fought against the simulator before, and curiosity overwhelmed caution. Next, Kakarot, son of Bardock, 3rd class, announced the supervisor. A heavily scarred Saiyan named Zorn who served as a combat instructor when not deployed on missions. As Kakarot stepped forward, he heard snickers from some of the elite class children watching from a separate area. Another 3rd class runt, one boy whispered loudly enough to be heard. This should be entertaining. Isn't his father that delusional soldier who claims to see the future? Another added, prompting more laughter. Kakarot's tail bristled with indignation, but he kept his expression neutral as he entered the simulation ring. The whispers weren't unfamiliar. Even at 5 years old, he understood that his family occupied a precarious position in Saiyan society. His father was respected for his combat prowess but mocked for his increasingly eccentric behavior. Bardock's stance on unconventional training methods and his occasional cryptic warnings had earned him a reputation for being unstable, a perception he deliberately encouraged as cover for his true activities. The simulation ring hummed to life, projecting 3 holographic opponents calibrated for a 5-year-old Saiyan of 3rd class potential. Kakarot settled into a fighting stance that was noticeably errant from the standard Saiyan form, more fluid, with his weight balanced for quick directional changes rather than power strikes. Zorn raised an eyebrow at this but said nothing as he activated the sequence. Begin. The holographic attackers lunged simultaneously, their movements predictable and straightforward, designed to test basic defensive capabilities rather than advanced combat skills. Most Saiyan children would respond with direct counterattacks, meeting force with greater force in the traditional Saiyan approach. Kakarot did not. Instead of blocking or striking back, he slipped between the attackers with a grace unusual for his age, allowing their momentum to carry them past him. As they turned to reacquire their target, he was already moving, striking precise points that would disable a real opponent. 1, 2, 3 calculated hits, and then he was clear again, watching attentively as the holographic figures adjusted their strategy. The observing children fell silent. Even Zorn leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued by this unorthodox approach. The simulation responded by increasing the aggression level of the attackers, their movements becoming faster and more coordinated. Kakarot's expression shifted from concentration to something resembling delight. This was a puzzle to solve, a challenge to overcome through observation and adaptation rather than raw power. When the first attacker reached him, Kakarot ducked under its strike and used its own momentum to throw it into the second attacker. The third came at him from behind, but he had already anticipated this. Dropping to the ground and sweeping its legs before springing up to deliver a finishing blow to all three in rapid succession. The simulation concluded, and the holographic opponents faded. The training hall remained unusually quiet as Zorn checked the performance metrics on his data pad. "Interesting technique," the instructor said, his gruff voice betraying neither approval nor criticism. "Who taught you to fight like that?" Kakarot hesitated, remembering his father's instructions about drawing too much attention. "I just watched and figured it out," he said, deliberately understating his training. Zorn looked skeptical but didn't press the issue. "Your speed and precision scores are surprisingly high. Power output is adequate for your class." He made a notation on his pad. Next, as Kakarot exited the simulation ring, he noticed someone watching him from the elevated observation platform, a small boy about his own age, but dressed in the distinctive armor of the royal family. Prince Vegeta, the son of King Vegeta, heir to the Saiyan throne, and reportedly the most promising warrior of their generation. Their eyes met briefly. The prince's gaze was cold, assessing, with none of the dismissive amusement the other elite children had shown. Instead, there was something like recognition, one predator acknowledging another. Then the moment passed as the prince turned away, apparently having seen what he came to observe. Kakarot returned to the general training area, where the other third-class children regarded him with a mixture of confusion and newfound respect. He'd passed the assessment without revealing too much of his true capabilities, but something told him that Prince Vegeta hadn't been fooled. The royal child had seen something in his performance that the others had missed. "That was different," said a female voice beside him. Kakarot turned to find a girl about his age studying him with unabashed curiosity. Her wild black hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her training armor bore the marks of frequent use. Like him, she carried the unmistakable energy signature of a third-class Saiyan, but there was an intensity about her that distinguished her from the others. "I'm Zuki," she introduced herself without ceremony. "Your technique is weird, but effective. Where did you learn it?" "My father," Kakarot admitted, seeing no reason to lie about this much. "He says that power isn't everything." Zuki looked scandalized. "That's practically treason," she whispered, though her eyes sparkled with interest rather than condemnation. "Next you'll say you don't want to serve Lord Frieza." Kakarot shrugged, careful not to reveal his true feelings about the galactic tyrant. "I just want to become stronger my own way." "Well, your own way nearly got you noticed by the prince," Zuki observed, nodding toward the observation platform where Vegeta had been standing. "That's not always a good thing. He doesn't like being outshone." "I wasn't trying to outshine anyone." "Doesn't matter. Results speak louder than intentions." She glanced around to ensure they weren't being monitored too closely, then leaned in. "Listen, if you want to survive here, you need to understand the hierarchy. Prince Vegeta is at the top. Everyone else is just background. If you stand out too much..." She drew a finger across her throat in a universal gesture. Kakarot frowned. This was essentially what his father had been warning him about, but hearing it from someone his own age made it more immediate, more real. "So I should deliberately perform worse." "I didn't say that," Zuki replied with a hint of exasperation. "Just be careful about who sees your true strength. Saiyans respect power, but we're also political. Everything here gets reported back to the elites, and eventually to Frieza's representatives. Before Kakarot could respond, a sharp whistle signaled the end of the training session. The children began filing out toward the recovery area, where nutritional supplements would be distributed to replace energy expended during training. As they walked, Zuki continued speaking in a low voice. My mother works in the medical division. She says your father comes in for brain scans sometimes. Is it true that he has visions? Kakarot stiffened. This was dangerous territory. He was injured on a mission once, he said vaguely. Sometimes he gets headaches. Zuki seemed disappointed by this mundane explanation but didn't press further. Instead, she changed the subject. You should come to the lower quarter combat ring sometime. There's training that doesn't get reported to the supervisors. More creative techniques. Unsanctioned training? Kakarot asked, both alarmed and intrigued. She grinned, revealing a missing canine tooth that was still growing in. The best kind. Tomorrow after the second sunset, if you're interested. Don't wear anything that identifies your family line. With that cryptic invitation, she peeled away from him, disappearing into the crowd of young Saiyans jostling for position at the supplement distribution station. Kakarot stood still for a moment, processing this unexpected interaction. His father had always emphasized the importance of building alliances, connections beyond family that you can trust when the time comes. Was Zuki offering such a connection? Or was this some kind of trap? Either way, he was curious enough to consider accepting her invitation. The prospect of learning combat techniques outside the standardized curriculum appealed to his innate desire to grow stronger through varied experiences. Besides, his father had always taught him to gather information from multiple sources. As he finally moved toward the supplement station, Kakarot noticed a familiar figure waiting at the training complex exit. Raditz, his expression thunderous. His older brother had clearly observed the entire assessment session. What was that display about? Raditz demanded as soon as Kakarot approached. Father told you to blend in, not show off like some elite class prodigy. I didn't show everything, Kakarot defended himself. Quote, and Instructor Zorn just said my power was adequate. Because you tricked the censors with those techniques father taught you, Raditz hissed, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. The prince was watching, Kakarot. The prince. A flicker of defiance rose in Kakarot's chest. So what? I didn't do anything wrong. Intent doesn't matter in Frieza's empire. Perception does. Raditz grabbed his brother's shoulder. His grip firm but not cruel. Despite their differences, there was genuine concern in the older boy's eyes. Listen to me, I've been on active duty for over a year now. I've seen how Frieza's officers operate. They're constantly looking for potential threats or exceptional talents they can exploit. Either way, you don't want their attention. The severity in his Br. Other's voice finally penetrated Kakarot's defensive attitude. I'll be more careful, he promised. Then, after a moment's hesitation, do we tell father about this? Raditz sighed, releasing his grip. Of course we do. He sees more than he lets on anyway. But be prepared for extra training as punishment, the exhausting kind, not the interesting kind. As they left the training complex and headed toward the transportation hub that would return them to their district, Kakarot found himself increasingly aware of the various power signatures around them, a skill his father had been cultivating in him for months. Most were the steady, aggressive pulses typical of Saiyans, but occasionally he detected something different. The cold, contained energy of Frieza's non-Saiyan officers watching from strategic positions. Monitoring the next generation of warriors who would serve their empire. For the first time, Kakarot began to truly understand the double life his father had been preparing him for. A life where every demonstration of ability had to be calculated, where true strength remained hidden, and where trust was a luxury afforded to very few. It was a dangerous game, but as his father often said, sometimes survival required becoming the hunter rather than the prey. The underground combat ring in the lower quarter bore little resemblance to the sterile, technology-enhanced facilities of the official training complex. Housed in a repurposed storage chamber beneath a decommissioned launch bay, it was dim, hot, and thrumming with illicit energy. The air smelled of sweat, blood, and something like excitement, a sharp contrast to the clinical atmosphere of sanctioned training. Kakarot slipped through the crowd, following Zuki's instructions to wear nondescript clothing without family or rank identifiers. Around him, Saiyans of various ages, mostly lower class, with a few curious mid-tier warriors, formed a rough circle around a sunken fighting pit where two combatants were currently engaged in a match that would never be permitted in official sessions. "You came." Zuki materialized beside him, her face illuminated by the uneven lighting. Unlike in the training center, here she seemed completely at ease, navigating the crowded space with practiced familiarity. "I was curious," Kakarot admitted, watching as one fighter executed a key manipulation technique he'd never seen before, condensing energy into a cutting edge rather than the standard concussive blast taught in sanctioned training. "That's Parsni," Zuki indicated the innovative fighter. "He developed that technique after seeing something similar on a border world mission. The supervisors discourage deviation from standard Saiyan battle methods, so he comes here to practice and teach." Kakarot absorbed this information with growing interest. His father had spoken of such variations in key manipulation, describing them as common in the alternative timeline where Kakarot grew up away from Saiyan influence. Seeing these innovations developing independently on planet Vegeta challenged the narrative that Saiyans were incapable of technical creativity. "How often do these sessions happen?" he asked. 3 times per lunar cycle," Zuki replied. "Different locations each time. You have to know someone to find out where." She gave him a sidelong glance. "Or be someone worth inviting." The match concluded with Parsni's victory, though his opponent had displayed impressive adaptability against the unusual technique. As the fighters exited the pit, a tall, heavily muscled Saiyan with a distinctive facial scar stepped forward to announce the next match. "Next up, we have Zuki against." He scanned the crowd until his eyes fell on Kakarot, our new arrival. "Let's see if Bardock's boy has inherited his father's innovative streak." Kakarot froze. "So much for anonymity." "Sorry," Zuki whispered, not looking particularly apologetic. "Your performance at assessment was too distinctive. Word gets around. You set me up," Kakarot realized, though he found himself more intrigued than angry. She shrugged. "Consider it an initiation. These gatherings are about showing what you can do beyond the prescribed limits. I thought you'd appreciate that." Before he could respond, the crowd parted, creating a path to the fighting pit. Zuki was already moving forward, her posture shifting into a combat stance that looked nothing like the standardized forms taught in official training. It was looser, more adaptable, clearly influenced by techniques observed from other species during planetary conquests. Kakarot hesitated only briefly before following. His father had warned him about drawing attention, but had also emphasized the importance of building connections with like-minded individuals who might eventually support their cause. This underground community of Saiyans developing techniques outside Imperial oversight represented exactly the kind of network they needed. As he stepped into the pit, Kakarot felt dozens of eyes assessing him, measuring the son of Bardock against whatever reputation his father had in this circle. From their expressions, he gathered that Bardock was viewed with a mixture of respect and wariness, a warrior known for unconventional methods and unpredictable behavior. "Standard rules," announced the scarred Saiyan. "No fatal blows, no permanent damage. Match ends with submission, unconsciousness, or my intervention. Power limiters remain activated to avoid detection by Imperial scouters." He gestured to small devices positioned around the perimeter of the pit. Technology that Kakarot recognized as modified versions of training equipment, reprogrammed to mask energy signatures rather than enhance them. "Begin when ready." Zuki didn't wait for further ceremony. She launched herself at Kakarot with a speed that exceeded what she'd shown in official training, her fighting style completely transformed from the textbook Saiyan approach she'd displayed earlier. Gone was the direct, power-focused aggression, replaced by fluid movements and unexpected angles of attack. Kakarot responded instinctively, drawing on the specialized training his father had provided. Rather than meeting force with force, he redirected her momentum, using minimal energy to maximum effect, a conservation principle Bardock had emphasized as essential for prolonged combat against superior opponents. The crowd murmured as the two children engaged in a display that defied traditional Saiyan combat doctrine. Where standard training encouraged direct energy projection and overwhelming force, they employed precision strikes, tactical repositioning, and carefully modulated key control. When Zuki generated a compressed energy sphere, a technique that required fine control rather than raw power, Kakarot countered not by blocking or overpowering it, but by creating a rotational field that deflected it harmlessly upward. This level of energy manipulation was rarely seen in fighters so young, and never demonstrated in Imperial assessment sessions. "Bardock's been busy," someone in the crowd commented. "That's not standard third-class potential," another observed. The match continued for several minutes, neither combatant gaining a decisive advantage. Kakarot found himself genuinely challenged by Zuki's inventive approach and unconventional techniques. This wasn't the predictable sparring of official training, it was dynamic, unpredictable, and surprisingly educational. When the scarred Saiyan finally called for the match to end, both children were breathing hard but grinning with the satisfaction of worthy exertion. The crowd's response was approving, not the raucous celebration that might greet a spectacular knockout, but measured appreciation of observers who recognized technical skill and tactical intelligence. "Well fought, both of you," the announcer declared. "Zuki continues to prove that healing aptitude doesn't preclude combat excellence. And Kakarot, he studied the boy with newfound interest, has clearly been taught to fight like someone expecting to face superior opponents. Interesting preparation for a child of planet Vegeta." This observation sent a ripple of murmurs through the audience. Kakarot tensed, wondering if he'd revealed too much. His father's training had indeed been oriented toward preparing him to eventually confront Frieza and his elite forces, opponents far beyond the power level of any young Saiyan. Zuki seemed to sense his discomfort and stepped forward. "My mother saw that all truly great warriors train as if their opponents will be stronger than themselves. Complacency kills more Saiyans than enemy combatants." This practical assessment diffused some of the tension, redirecting the conversation toward training philosophy rather than the potentially seditious implications of Bardock preparing his son to fight superior opponents, in a society where Frieza stood unchallenged at the apex of power. As they exited the fighting pit, Kakarot noticed several older Saiyans studying him with calculated interest. They weren't approaching yet, but their attention suggested that his performance had opened doors to potential connections, exactly the kind of network his father had been hoping to develop. "You held back," Zuki observed quietly as they moved toward a refreshment station where synthesized recovery drinks were being distributed. "So did you," Kakarot countered. "That healing aptitude he mentioned, you were reading my energy patterns to anticipate my moves, weren't you?" She looked surprised, then pleased. "Not many notice that. It's a variation on the sensitivity that makes me useful in the medical division. I can feel disruptions and imbalances in energy flow." Her expression darkened slightly. "Not a particularly valued skill in a culture obsessed with destructive output. My father says that understanding energy is more important than simply generating it." Kakarot offered. "He taught me to sense power signatures without a scouter." Zuki's eyes widened. "That's a rare skill among Saiyans. Most rely entirely on the technology Frieza's empire provides." She lowered her voice further. "Some say that's deliberate, keeping us dependent on their devices, unable to sense power fluctuations naturally, especially the kind that MIGHT reveal when someone is suppressing their true strength." The political implications of this observation weren't lost on Kakarot. If Saiyans could sense energy naturally, they might have detected Frieza's true power long before he positioned himself to destroy their planet. The reliance on external technology for such a fundamental battlefield awareness was a vulnerability his father had identified and sought to eliminate in his son's training. "Is that why you invited me here?" Kakarot asked. "Because you sensed something different in my energy pattern." "Partly," Zuki admitted, "but also because of who your father is. Bardock has a reputation in certain circles. Warriors who've served with him say he changed after the Konosuba campaign. Started fighting differently, training differently, watching Frieza's officers with too much awareness." She shrugged. "I was curious if his son would show similar adaptations." Kakarot absorbed this information carefully. His father's activities had drawn more notice than he'd realized, though apparently not enough to trigger intervention from Frieza's surveillance apparatus. These underground networks might represent both opportunity and risk. "And now that you've seen me fight," he prompted. Zuki smiled, a sharp expression that reminded him that for all her unusual interests, she was still very much a Saiyan predator. "Now Think you might be worth knowing when the interesting times come. She handed him a small communication device, cleverly disguised as a standard-issue training accessory. This will notify you of the next gathering. Your choice whether to attend. Before he could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. The crowd parted as two elite-class warriors in formal armor entered. The underground space. Not Frieza's officers, but high-ranking Saiyans whose presence in this lower-quarter venue was unprecedented. The atmosphere immediately tensed, hands moving subtly toward weapons. Energy signatures shifting as fighters prepared for potential conflict. The scarred announcer stepped forward, his posture respectful but not submissive. "Commander Nappa," he acknowledged. "This is an unexpected honor." The larger of the two elites, a towering, muscular Saiyan with a distinctive mustache, surveyed the gathering with an expression of calculated disinterest. At ease, he rumbled. "This isn't an official inspection." Quote. His companion, a leaner warrior with a calculating gaze, added, "Consider this a cultural observation." The prince expressed interest in certain unconventional combat techniques reportedly being developed outside standard training protocols. A current of alarm ran through the crowd. Prince Vegeta's interest could legitimize their activities, or expose them to unwelcome imperial scrutiny. "The prince honors us with his attention," the announcer replied carefully. "Though I'm curious how His Highness became aware of our humble gatherings." Nappa's eyes scanned the crowd, eventually settling on Kakarot. A recent assessment session featured some interesting deviations from standard combat doctrine. Techniques that seemed familiar to those who've observed Bardock's squad in action. All eyes turned to Kakarot, who maintained a neutral expression despite the sudden knot of tension in his stomach. His performance at the assessment had indeed drawn more attention than intended, enough to pique the interest of the royal household. "The prince wishes to extend an invitation," Nappa continued. "A private training session, tomorrow, dawn." He addressed Kakarot directly now. "You will attend." It wasn't a request. Zuki shot Kakarot a warning glance, but he already understood the implications. Declining would raise suspicions, accepting would place him directly under the scrutiny of the royal family, and by extension, Frieza's watchful eye. "I would be honored," Kakarot replied with appropriate deference, while his mind raced through the potential ramifications of this development. His father had anticipated eventually building connections within the power structure, but not so soon. Not before Kakarot had fully mastered the art of concealing his true potential. Nappa nodded brusquely. "A transport will collect you." With that, the elite warriors departed, leaving a wake of uneasy speculation behind them. "Well," Zuki murmured, "you wanted to know if coming here was worth the risk. I'd say having the prince's direct attention answers that question, though perhaps not in the way either of us expected." Kakarot consighed, read the complex political web he'd inadvertently entered. His father had always spoken of patience, of the long game they were playing against Frieza's empire. But events were accelerating beyond their careful planning. "I need to speak with my father," he said. "I'd hurry if I were you," Zuki advised. "News travels fast, especially news involving the prince. Better that Bardock hears it from you than through official channels." As Kakarot prepared to leave, the scarred announcer approached him. "Your father once said something that stuck with me," the older Saiyan told him quietly. He aid that a warrior who only knows one way to fight will eventually meet someone who knows two. Remember that tomorrow. With this cryptic advice weighing on his mind, Kakarot departed the underground gathering. Hurrying through the darkening streets of the lower quarter toward home. Above him, the night sky of planet Vegeta blazed with stars. Distant worlds, many already conquered by Saiyan warriors in service to Frieza's empire. Somewhere among them was Earth, the planet where, in another timeline, he might have grown up in peace, unconstrained by imperial politics. But this was his reality, a complex web of power, secrets, and carefully cultivated skills. And tomorrow, he would face Prince Vegeta, the royal heir whose very existence represented both the pride of Saiyan culture and its subjugation to Frieza's will. Whatever happened in that encounter would shape the path forward, accelerating or endangering his father's long-game strategy for Saiyan liberation. As he raced home through the shadows of the capital city, Kakarot felt the weight of that responsibility settling onto his young shoulders, a burden he hadn't expected to bear so soon. Bardock stood motionless on the balcony of their dwelling. his silhouette sharp against the pre-dawn sky. He'd received Kakarot's news with unsettling calm, asking only a few pointed questions before falling into a contemplative silence that had lasted through the night. Now, as the first hints of morning light crept over the horizon, he finally turned to address his son. "You understand what this means," he said. It wasn't a question. Kakarot nodded, already dressed in his best training gear, basic but immaculately maintained. "The prince is evaluating potential threats or assets." "Yes." Bardock's scarred face revealed little emotion, but his energy signature betrayed his concern, a subtle fluctuation that only someone trained in ki sensing would detect. "Prince Vegeta is young, but he's already Frieza's most valuable Saiyan. The tyrant keeps him close, shapes his development, uses him as both weapon and hostage to ensure our continued servitude." The bitterness in his father's voice was rare and striking. Bardock K typically maintained rigid control over such sentiments, especially when discussing the royal family or Frieza's governance. "Should I deliberately perform poorly?" Kakarot asked, echoing the question he'd posed to Zuki the day before. Bardock shook his head. "No. The prince would recognize that tactic immediately. He's been trained to identify deception since he could walk." He placed a hand on Kakarot's shoulder, his grip firm. "You will fight well, but not at your full capacity. Show enough skill to explain why he noticed you, but not enough to suggest you've been receiving specialized training beyond standard combat instruction. And if he pushes me, if he demands more, then you will have to make a judgment in the moment." Bardock's expression softened slightly. "I trust your instincts, son. You have a gift for reading situations that reminds me of your mother." The comparison to Jine, who despite her gentle nature possessed a remarkable intuitive understanding of others' motivations, was high praise from Bardock. It steadied Kakarot's nerves more effectively than any tactical advice could have. "There's something else," Bardock continued, his voice dropping to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. "Even in their own home, this meeting may be an opportunity as well as a risk. The prince is not Frieza, despite the tyrant's efforts to mold him. He is Saiyan, with Saiyan pride and a Saiyan's instinctive resentment of subjugation." Kakarot understood the implication immediately. "You think he could eventually support resistance against Frieza?" "Not now," Bardock cautioned. "Perhaps not for many years. But seeds planted today might grow into alliance tomorrow." He paused, weighing his next words carefully. "Watch for signs of his true feelings about Frieza's empire. Not what he says, what his energy reveals when certain topics arise." A soft chime from the communication panel indicated the arrival of the transport. Bardock straightened, his expression returning to the guarded neutrality he maintained in public. "Remember who you are," he told Kakarot. "Not just a warrior, but a hunter. Patient, observant. Today, you gather information as much as you demonstrate skill." Kakarot nodded, centering himself as his father had taught him, finding the calm core beneath the natural Saiyan aggression that surged at the prospect of challenging combat. As he turned to leave, Bardock added one final instruction. "When you return, I want to hear everything, not just what was said and done, but what you sensed. The prince's true power level, his emotional responses, the dynamics between him and his handlers. Details that others might miss." "I understand," Kakarot promised, then descended to meet the transport that would take him to what might be the most consequential sparring match of his young life. The Royal Training Facility occupied an elevated position in the capital city, its architecture distinctly different from the utilitarian structures that dominated most of planet Vegeta. Built from rare materials imported from across Frieza's empire, it combined sophisticated technology with imposing aesthetics designed to reinforce the elevated status of the royal bloodline. As Kakarot was escorted through security checkpoints of increasing stringency, he observed everything with the careful attention his father had cultivated in him. The GUARDS were exclusively elite-class Saiyans, their power levels impressive but their energy signatures revealing the strain of constant vigilance. The monitoring systems were more advanced than anything he'd seen in standard facilities, including energy-dampening fields that would prevent unauthorized power surges during training. Most interesting were the non-Saiyan technicians who maintained the Sai systems, members of various species from across Frieza's empire, their subdued demeanor suggesting they occupied a precarious position in the hierarchy. Kakarot noted how they averted their eyes when Saiyan warriors passed, Their energy patterns constricted with constant stress. Eventually, he was led to a circular chamber at the heart of the facility. Unlike the public training centers with their observable arenas, this space was designed for privacy, a place where the royal heir could develop techniques away from prying eyes. The only observers were Commander Nappa, standing guard at the entrance, and 3 technicians monitoring equipment from a recessed control area. And there, in the center of the chamber, stood Prince Vegeta. Even at 5 years old, the royal heir carried himself with unmistakable authority. His compact frame radiated controlled power, his posture perfect, his expression severe beyond his years. The royal armor he wore was scaled for his size but otherwise identical to the ceremonial battle gear worn by King Vegeta himself, a constant reminder of his lineage and destiny. "So," the prince said as Kakarot approached, "you're the third-class anomaly." His voice carried the cultured accent of the royal court, but underneath was the hard edge common to all Saiyans, the predator's assurance of superior position in the food chain. Kakarot bowed with precise respect, neither servile nor perfunctory. "Prince Vegeta, thank you for the invitation to train." "This isn't social," Vegeta corrected sharply. "I observed your assessment performance. Your technique is unorthodox for a third-class warrior. I want to see it directly." The bluntness was typical of Saiyan interaction, but Kakarot detected something else beneath it, genuine curiosity, perhaps even a hint of excitement at the prospect of something different from the regimented training that dominated the prince's existence. "I would be honored to demonstrate," Kakarot replied carefully, settling into a neutral stance that revealed little of his true combat approach. Vegeta snorted at this diplomatic response. "Spare me the courtesies. Show me what you can actually do." Without further preamble, he launched into an attack. The prince's speed was startling, significantly faster than anything Kakarot had faced in standard training or even the underground combat ring. His technique was flawless, each movement executed with precision born of countless hours of elite instruction. This wasn't just talent or breeding, it was the result of relentless, specialized development from the earliest age. Kakarot responded defensively at first, analyzing the prince's style and rhythm while appearing to struggle with the superior speed and power. This wasn't entirely an act. Vegeta's capabilities exceeded his expectations, forcing him to access more of his true skill than he'd initially planned. "Is this all?" Vegeta taunted as he drove Kakarot back with a series of perfectly executed combinations. "Your performance yesterday suggested actual talent." The dismissive tone triggered a flicker of genuine Saiyan pride in Kakarot's chest. He suppressed it immediately, remembering his father's warnings, but allowed himself to demonstrate a bit more of his capability, redirecting one of Vegeta's strikes and countering with a technique he'd developed through his father's specialized training. The prince's eyes widened slightly as he was forced to adjust his balance, a rare occurrence in his carefully controlled sparring sessions. Rather than showing anger at this momentary advantage, he seemed intrigued. "Better," he acknowledged, then increased the intensity of his assault. What followed was a carefully calibrated dance. Kakarot revealed enough of his unconventional style to maintain the prince's interest without demonstrating the full extent of his abilities. Vegeta, for his part, seemed to be testing rather than dominating, probing for weaknesses, analyzing responses, assessing potential rather than simply asserting superiority. During a momentary separation, as both fighters reset their positions, Vegeta asked abruptly, "Who taught you to fight like this?" "My father," Kakarot answered truthfully. "He believes that adaptability is as important as power." "Bardock," Vegeta mused, "the third-class commander who reportedly receives visions." His tone made it clear what he thought of such claims. Yet his combat record is impressive. 27 planetary conquests without losing a squad member. Unusual efficiency. The prince was well informed, suggesting our personal interest or specific briefing prior to this session. Either possibility was significant. "My father values survival," Kakarot said carefully. "He teaches that a warrior who returns from battle can grow stronger for the next one." Quote, "A pragmatic perspective," Vegeta conceded, though not the glorification of heroic death that traditional Saiyan doctrine endorses. He launched another attack sequence, this one incorporating energy projection techniques that were advanced for his age. "What else does he teach about Saiyan traditions?" The question came between strikes, seemingly casual but with deliberate intent. Kakarot recognized the tactic: combat conversation to probe for unguarded thoughts while attention was divided. He'd used similar approaches himself during training sessions with Raditz. That our greatest strength is our ability to grow stronger after each challenge, Kakarot replied, deflecting an energy blast rather than absorbing or countering it, a conservative approach that masked his true energy control capabilities. That Saiyans are born to evolve, not just conquer. Something flickered in Vegeta's expression: interest, perhaps even recognition. He pushed harder, his attacks becoming more creative, less textbook. And what of our service to Lord Frieza? What does Bardock teach about that? The question was dangerously direct, probing at the heart of his father's carefully concealed rebellion. Kakarot maintained his composure, sensing that this might be the real purpose behind the private session, assessing not just his combat potential but his political reliability. That we serve with honor and efficiency, he answered diplomatically. That each mission completed successfully brings glory to planet Vegeta. It wasn't exactly a lie. His father did speak of honor and efficiency, though in the context of preserving Saiyan lives for the eventual confrontation with Frieza rather than mindless service to the Empire. Vegeta seemed to recognize the careful evasion. His energy signature revealed a complex mix of emotions: frustration, calculation, and something that might have been grudging respect for the diplomatic response. Your father's reputation for independent thinking is well known, the prince said, launching a series of increasingly challenging attacks that forced Kakarot to reveal more of his true capabilities to avoid being overwhelmed. Some find it concerning. My father is loyal to planet Vegeta and its future, Kakarot responded, allowing genuine conviction to enter his voice. This, at least, was absolute truth. The training session continued for nearly an hour, evolving from basic combat assessment to something more complex: a physical conversation between two young warriors who, despite the vast difference in their social standing, shared a common heritage and perhaps more understanding than either would openly admit. Throughout the exchange, Kakarot observed not just Vegeta's fighting style but the subtleties of his responses, particularly when topics adjacent to Frieza's governance arose. The prince maintained rigid control, but tiny fluctuations in his energy signature revealed deeper currents: resentment, ambition, and a fierce pride that extended beyond his royal status to encompass Saiyan identity itself. When Commander Nappa finally announced that the session should conclude, both boys were breathing hard, their training gear showing evidence of a genuine challenge. Vegeta stepped back, his expression thoughtful as he evaluated Kakarot one final time. Your techniques are unorthodox but effective, he stated with clinical precision, particularly against opponents relying on standard combat patterns. He paused, then added what might have been the closest thing to a compliment: tea in his repertoire. Not entirely what I would expect from a third-class warrior. Kakarot bowed again, maintaining the appropriate deference while allowing a hint of Saiyan pride to show. Thank you for the opportunity, Prince Vegeta. As he prepared to depart, Vegeta made one final comment, pitched low enough that only Kakarot could hear it. Your father's theories about Saiyan potential, they aren't entirely without merit. Remember that. With that cryptic remark, the prince turned away, already focused on his next training routine as if the extraordinary session had been merely a momentary diversion. But Kakarot, attuned to the subtle shifts in energy that his father had taught him to recognize, sensed the significance beneath the casual dismissal. Seeds had indeed been planted, tiny possibilities that might, with careful nurturing, grow into something more substantial. As Commander Nappa escorted him from the royal facility, Kakarot organized his observations, preparing the detailed report his father would expect. This encounter with Prince Vegeta represented both risk and opportunity. The royal heir had identified him as someone worth watching, which meant increased scrutiny from those who monitored the prince's activities. But he had also revealed hints of a perspective not entirely aligned with Frieza's interests, a nascent Saiyan pride that might eventually be elevated into something more revolutionary. As the transport carried him back toward the lower districts of the capital, Kakarot gazed out at the red landscape of planet Vegeta, the world his father had saved through foresight and patience. The civilization they were working to preserve not just from Frieza's planned destruction but from the more insidious corruption of subservience to alien rule. The game was becoming more complex, the stakes higher than he had previously understood. But for the first time, Kakarot began to truly believe in the possibility his father had glimpsed in his visions, a future where Saiyans might reclaim their destiny, led by warriors who understood that true strength came not from blind aggression but from adaptation, strategy, and the courage to evolve beyond imposed limitations. The path ahead would be dangerous, the timeline uncertain. But today had confirmed what Bardock had always taught him: patience and observation were weapons as powerful as any energy blast. And in the complex political ecosystem of Frieza's empire, sometimes the most significant victories were the ones that appeared, to casual observers, as merely successful navigation of potential threats. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Blood and Stars. Steel sang against steel. The distinctive ring of Saiyan battle armor clashing echoed across the training grounds of the southern outpost. 6 years had passed since Kakarot's fateful sparring session with Prince Vegeta. 6 years of careful growth, measured progress, and increasingly complex navigation of planet Vegeta's dangerous political landscape. Now 11 years old, Kakarot's body had begun its transformation from child to warrior. Lean muscle wrapped his frame, the result of rigorous training rather than the bulk that characterized many Saiyan adolescents. His movements held a fluid precision that contrasted with the brutish power typically celebrated in their culture. "Again," barked Bardock, his scarred face showing neither approval nor disappointment as he reset his stance. Sweat darkened Kakarot's training suit. They'd been at this for hours, far from prying eyes, in a decommissioned planetary defense station T. Had Bardock had quietly claimed for their private sessions. Outside, the twin suns of planet Vegeta cast harsh shadows across the red landscape. Inside, father and son engaged in combat techniques. Chi would raise dangerous questions if observed by Frieza's ever-present informants. Kakarot gathered his energy in the specialized pattern his father had been teaching him, condensing his power into concentrated points rather than the standard Saiyan approach of maximal output. The technique required fine control rather than raw force, allowing for more efficient energy usage and, crucially, the ability to mask one's true power level from standard scouter readings. "Your left side remains exposed when you transition," Bardock noted, exploiting the weakness with a precise strike that sent Kakarot sliding across the polished floor. "An opponent who recognizes patterns will use that against you." Rather than frustration, Kakarot felt only determination surge through him. He rose immediately, adjusted his approach, and attacked again, this time protecting his vulnerable side while maintaining the complex energy distribution. Bardock blocked the improved assault with increased effort, ash of satisfaction crossing his face so quickly that only someone who knew him well would have caught it. "Better," he acknowledged, disengaging to assess his son's form. "You're learning to adapt mid-combat. Essential for what's coming." Quote. The vague reference to future conflict hung in the air between them. Over the years, Bardock had gradually revealed more of his visions to Kakarot, fragments of possible futures where Saiyan warriors fought not just for conquest but for survival against threats that dwarfed even Frieza's terrible power. These glimpses shaped their training, pushing beyond conventional techniques toward something that combined Saiyan strength with innovative approaches never developed in their warrior culture. "Father," Kakarot ventured during a brief hydration break, "when will you tell me the full extent of what you saw?" "These fragments, they don't form a complete picture." Bardock studied his son, gauging his readiness for more truth. The boy had proven himself disciplined beyond his years, capable of maintaining a careful public persona while developing his true potential in secret. Still, some knowledge carried its own dangers. "Soon," he finally said. "But today, we focus on practical matters. Your first planetary deployment has been assigned." Kakarot straightened immediately, his fatigue forgotten. First deployment was a significant milestone for a young Saiyan. The transition from training to actual conquest, the opportunity to prove one's value to the Empire. "Where?" he asked, unable to completely mask his excitement despite years of conditioning to control his emotional responses. "The Thalius system, a small frontier world called Eridan." Bardock's expression remained neutral, but his energy signature revealed concern that Kakarot had learned to detect. "The mission parameters are standard: planetary assessment, indigenous species evaluation, resource cataloging." Kakarot recognized the bureaucratic terminology that masked the reality of what Saiyan assessment typically entailed, and if the indigenous species is deemed unsuitable for integration into the Empire. Then planetary clearing becomes the priority, Bardock answered evenly. You've studied the protocols. Indeed he had. Every Saiyan child was taught the imperial classification system for conquered worlds and their inhabitants. Species considered useful air subjugated as labor or support populations. Those deemed unprofitable or potentially troublesome were eliminated, their planets repurposed for resource extraction or colonization. Who commands the mission? Kakarot asked, though he already suspected the answer. I do. Bardock rolled his shoulder, an old injury from the Connaughton campaign occasionally troubling him still. I've requested you be assigned to my squadron for your initial deployments. Officially, it's to assess your combat readiness without familial bias. Unofficially, it gives you control over what I see and do, Kakarot finished. Bardock nodded. The first mission changes a warrior. How it changes you will depend partly on how you're guided through it. He paused, his voice dropping. Raditz had no such guidance. His first deployment was under Commander Vegeta. The mention of Kakarot's older brother brought a complexity of emotions. At 17, Raditz had established himself as a competent, if not exceptional, Saiyan warrior. His relationship with Kakarot had evolved from the simple rivalry of childhood to something more nuanced, a mixture of protective instinct, lingering resentment of their father's special attention to the younger son, and genuine brotherhood that occasionally broke through their carefully maintained public personas. When do we leave? Kakarot asked, already calculating how much additional preparation time he had. 3 days. Standard squad configuration. 5 warriors including you. Bardock began powering down the training facility's systems. Report to the launch bay at third dawn. We'll use the transit time for final briefing. As they prepared to depart, Bardock placed a hand on his son's shoulder, a rare gesture of physical connection. One thing more. Prince Echelot will be observing this mission. Kakarot nearly stumbled in surprise. Princess Echelot, the king's niece. Why would royal family be interested in a standard frontier assessment? Officially, she's conducting an efficiency evaluation of deployment protocols for the science division. Bardock's expression remained carefully neutral. Unofficially, I suspect she's been tasked with monitoring our family more closely. Your continued connection to Prince Vegeta has raised questions in certain quarters. The connection his father referenced was tenuous but significant. Since our initial sparring session 6 years ago, Kakarot had been occasionally summoned for additional training with the prince, never frequently enough to suggest special status, but regularly enough to establish an unusual relationship across class lines. These sessions were ostensibly to provide Vegeta with diverse combat experiences, but both participants recognized them as something more complex, a careful exchange of perspectives disguised as physical training. Is this observation a problem? Kakarot asked, immediately assessing potential threats and adjustments needed. Not necessarily. Bardock secured the facility behind them as they stepped into the harsh sunlight. Princess Echelot is analytically brilliant but politically pragmatic. Her loyalty is to the Saiyan throne, not necessarily to Frieza's empire. That makes her potentially valuable. Kakarot absorbed this assessment, recognizing the subtext. Over the years, his father had built a careful network of allies across planet Vegeta, warriors, technicians, and support personnel who harbored quiet resentment against Frieza's domination. Each relationship required specialized handling, tailored to individual motivations and risk tolerance. If Echelot was now focusing attention on their family, it represented both danger and opportunity. I'll be appropriately respectful and unremarkable, Kakarot promised. Bardock's tight smile acknowledged the understanding. Good. Now go. Your mother expects you for meal preparation. They separated at the transit junction, each taking different routes back to their family DW. Elling, a standard security protocol Bardock had instituted years ago to minimize patterns that might be tracked. As Kakarot navigated the bustling lower quarter of the capital city, he processed the implications of his upcoming deployment. First planetary mission, royal observation, potential for combat action. The confluence of factors suggested this seemingly routine assignment carried deeper significance than appeared on the surface. His father clearly thought so, which meant Kakarot needed to prepare not just physically but mentally for whatever challenges awaited on Eridan. As he rounded a corner near the central market, an unexpected energy signature flared at the edge of his awareness, powerful, distinctive, and moving with purpose directly toward him. He barely had time to brace himself before a compact figure dropped from an overhead walkway, landing in a combative stance that blocked his path. "Your reflexes are getting dull, Kakarot," announced a female voice filled with predatory amusement. "A proper warrior would have sensed me 3 seconds earlier." Caulifla stood before him, her wild black hair pulled back in a practical style that did nothing to diminish her fierce beauty. At 12 years old, she had already distinguished herself as one of the most promising female Saiyan warriors of their generation, a status she'd earned through relentless training in an innovative fighting style that incorporated techniques from across Frieza's empire. "I sensed you," Kakarot countered, settling into a relaxed stance that nonetheless positioned him to respond to any sudden movement. "I simply chose not to acknowledge the threat." Her sharp laugh held genuine amusement. "Arrogant as always. One day that confidence will cost you." Despite her combative words, there was no real hostility in her energy. Over the years, Caulifla had evolved from a distant training rival to something approaching friendship, a relationship difficult to define within traditional Saiyan social structures, which emphasized competition over cooperation outside family units. Heading to the deployment briefing, Kakarot asked, falling into step beside her when she indicated they should continue walking. Caulifla shot him a surprised glance. "How did you?" She stopped herself, eyes narrowing. "Your father told you. He always seems to know assignments before they're officially announced." Kakarot shrugged noncommittally, neither confirming nor denying. Bardock's preternatural awareness of imperial decisions remained one of their family's most closely guarded secrets. "I received my notification this morning," Caulifla continued, apparently deciding not to press the issue. "First deployment. Eridan assessment. Under Commander Bardock's squad." Her energy signature Rev. Al had mixed feelings about this arrangement. Pride at being selected for what was considered an elite unit despite her youth, combined with wariness about serving under Kakarot's father. "You're the 5th squad member," Kakarot realized. His father hadn't mentioned specific personnel assignments beyond Kakarot's inclusion. Disappointed, she challenged, a hint of vulnerability beneath the aggression. Impressed, he corrected honestly. "My father selects his squad based on capability, not connections. If he requested you, he sees something valuable in your approach." This assessment softened her defensive posture slightly. They walked in companionable silence through the market district, each processing the implications of serving on their first deployment together. For Saiyan youth, ideal planetary missions were formative experiences that often determined future specializations and career trajectories within Frieza's military hierarchy. "I've heard rumors about Eridan," Caulifla finally said, her voice pitched low enough that only Kakarot's enhanced senses could detect it over the market's bustle. "They say the indigenous population has developed unusual energy manipulation techniques. Not ki-based like ours, but something different." This was news to Kakarot, though he was careful not to show surprise. "Where did you hear this?" "My uncle returned from the neighboring system last cycle. Said Imperial scouts have been monitoring Eridan for specific energy signatures before authorizing Saiyan deployment." Her eyes gleamed with the characteristic Saiyan interest in potential combat challenges. "Could be interesting. Something beyond the standard resistance we've trained against." Kakarot filed this information away for later discussion with his father. If Eridan featured unusual energy manipulation, it might explain Bardock's specific interest in the mission, and possibly Princess Echelot's observation role as well. The science division had been researching alternative energy technologies for decades, seeking advantages within Frieza's competitive imperial structure. "We should train together before deployment," Caulifla suggested as they approached T. He Residential Junction where their paths would diverge. Compare notes on Frontier World Tactics. The invitation contained layers of meaning within Saiyan culture, a professional acknowledgement of mutual respect, a practical suggestion for mission preparation, and perhaps something more personal that neither would directly articulate. Saiyan emotional development was complicated, with traditional warrior culture discouraging attachment while biology and instinct pushed in different directions. 3 hours past second sunset, Kakarot agreed. The abandoned processing facility in Sector 7. Bring your specialized equipment. Caulifla nodded sharply, then departed without further farewell, typical Saiyan abruptness masking whatever complex emotions might lie beneath. Kakarot continued toward his family dwelling, his mind cataloging the day's developments while his senses remained alert for surveillance or unexpected approaches. When he arrived home, the dwelling was unusually quiet. His mother Jine was seated at the central table, methodically cleaning a set of specialized medical tools she used in her work at the lower quarter healing center, a position that utilized her rare Saiyan sensitivity to energy fluctuations. Though considered an unsuitable trait for a warrior, this ability had proven valuable in treating combat injuries, allowing her to maintain respectable stat. As despite her departure from active military service. Raditz home, she said without preamble, looking up from her work. He returned early from his deployment. Something happened. Kakarot immediately sensed the underlying concern in her carefully neutral statement. Saiyan deployments operated on strict timetables. Early returns typically indicated either extraordinary success or problematic complications. Given his brother's energy signature emanating from their shared sleeping quarters, turbulent, agitated, threaded with something like shame, Kakarot suspected the latter. How bad? He asked quietly. Jine's hand stilled momentarily. Bad enough that he's requested reassignment from Commander Vegeta's unit. Your father is with him now. This was unprecedented. Reassignment requests were rare among Saiyans, who prized loyalty to their squad leaders and viewed such changes as admissions of weakness or incompatibility. For Raditz to take such a step, particularly from a prestige House assignment under the king's brother, suggested something fundamental had occurred. Kakarot moved toward the sleeping quarters, but his mother's voice stopped him. Wait, let your father handle this first. Her expression softened slightly. Your deployment notification came while you were training. Eridan, correct? He nodded, recognizing her attempt to distract him from his brother's situation. Your father believes this mission is important, she continued, her voice carrying the weight of shared secrets. More than a standard assessment. Be watchful, particularly of Princess Echelot's interest. So his mother knew about the royal observer. No surprise, little occurred in their family without Jine's quiet awareness. Though she maintained the appearance of a typical Saiyan mate focused on domestic matters, she was an essential part of Bardock's careful rebellion, her political insights often proving as valuable as his precognitive glimpses. I'll be careful, Kakarot promised. Though I don't understand why a frontier world would draw such attention. Jine resumed her methodical cleaning, her movements precise and efficient. Your father believes that what we find there might provide answers about key manipulation beyond what Frieza's empire has documented. Potentially valuable for our long-term objectives. The careful phrasing acknowledged the unspoken reality that shaped their family's existence. Bardock's vision of eventual resistance against Frieza required technological and tactical advantages that currently seemed impossible against such overwhelming power. Any unusual energy manipulation techniques could represent crucial pieces of that puzzle. Their conversation was interrupted by Bardock's emergence from the sleeping quarters, his expression grave but controlled. He exchanged a meaningful look with Jine before addressing Kakarot. Your brother needs rest. We'll discuss his situation later. His tone brooked no argument. For now, we focus on Eridan. Caulifla has been assigned to our squad. Kakarot nodded. We encountered each other in the market district. She mentioned unusual energy signatures on the planet. Correct. Imperial Scout S detected anomalous readings inconsistent with standard developmental patterns for pre-spaceflight civilizations. Bardock moved to the secured data terminal in the corner of their dwelling, one of several modifications he'd made over the years to create private communication channels outside Imperial monitoring. The official mission parameters emphasize resource assessment, but the science devis Ion has added specific objectives regarding indigenous energy manipulation. The terminal displayed a holographic representation of Eridan, a small, verdant world orbiting a yellow star in a stable system far from major trade routes. Data scrolled alongside the projection, highlighting atmospheric composition, gravity measurements, and preliminary biological scans. The indigenous population Rs humanoid but genetically distinct from standard Saiyan-compatible species, Bardock explained, indicating clusters of settlements scattered across the planet's northern continent. Technological development equivalent to early industrial stage, with localized energy generation capabilities beyond what their visible infrastructure should support. Kakarot studied the data with careful attention, suggesting hidden facilities are non-standard energy sources. Precisely. Bardock manipulated the display to highlight specific regions. Our deployment will ostensibly conduct standard assessment protocols. But our actual objective is to locate and evaluate these energy sources before submitting recommendations to the Imperial Registry. The subtext was clear: if valuable technology existed on Eridan, Bardock wanted to understand it before Frieza's administrators made decisions about the planet's fate. Information gathered discreetly during this mission might eventually serve their own purposes. Regardless of Imperial directives and Princess Echelot's involvement, Kakarot asked, complicates matters. Bardock's mouth tightened. As Science Division Liaison, she'll have author ITY to override squad decisions regarding technological assessment. Our challenge will be managing her involvement while still achieving our objectives. The conversation continued into the evening, delving into tactical details and contingency planning. Throughout the discussion, Kakarot remained acutely aware of his brother's troubled energy signature from the adjacent room, a reminder of the end sequences that could arise from missions gone wrong in Frieza's empire. Whatever had happened during Raditz's deployment had clearly affected him deeply, adding an undercurrent of urgency to Kakarot's own preparation. Later, as the household settled into nighttime routines, Kakarot finally had an opportunity to speak with his brother. He found Raditz on the dwelling's small rooftop terrace, staring out at the capital city's illuminated skyline. At 17, Raditz had grown into an imposing figure, tall even by Saiyan standards, with a mane of wild hair that reached past his shoulders and TTLE scars that testified to his active service record. "Father told you to leave me alone," Raditz said without turning, having sensed his brother's approach. "He suggested it," Kakarot corrected, moving to stand beside him. "I chose otherwise." A short, humorless laugh escaped Raditz. "Still making your own decisions. Some things never change." They stood in silence for several minutes, the distant sounds of the city washing over them. Unlike human siblings, Saiyan brothers typically maintained a complex relationship balanced between competitive rivalry and mutual defense against external threats. Their bond had been further complicated by Bardock's focused attention on Kakarot's development, attention that Raditz had both resented and understood as necessary given what their father had foreseen. Commander Vegeta ordered the execution of surrendered combatants, Raditz finally said, his voice flat. Children, non-warriors, after their leaders had already accepted Imperial terms. Kakarot absorbed this information silently, recognizing both the moral weight of what had occurred and the political danger of discussing it. Such actions weren't uncommon in Frieza's empire, where conquered populations were valued primarily for their utility rather than any inherent right to existence. But they represented exactly the kind of brutality that Bardock had been quietly working against, the mindless violence that diminished rather than enhanced Saiyan honor. "You objected?" Kakarot asked carefully. "Not publicly," Raditz clarified. "I'm not suicidal, but I hesitated long enough for Commander Vegeta to notice. Long enough to raise questions about my commitment." His fist clenched against the terrace railing. "So I requested reassignment before he could report the incident to Frieza's administrators. Claimed combat fatigue affecting performance. A shameful excuse, but better than being flagged for sympathy toward enemy populations." The bitterness in his voice revealed how deeply this experience had affected him. Despite years of conditioning in traditional Saiyan conquest protocols, some core part of Raditz had recoiled from unnecessary cruelty, a reaction to would be viewed as weakness by Imperial standards but represented exactly the kind of moral awareness their father had tried to nurture alongside warrior strength. "Father understands," Kakarot said simply. Raditz turned to face him fully, his expression a complex mixture of anger, shame, and something like envy. "Of course he does. The great Bardock, with his visions and his plans. He's been preparing you for these moments your entire life. Teaching you to navigate these moral complications." His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "But some of us had to learn the hard way, brother." "Some." of us had to discover our limits while standing in pools of blood with Frieza's officers watching for any sign of weakness. The raw emotion behind these words struck Kakarot with unexpected force. He had always known that Raditz's path differed from his own, less protected, less guided, more exposed to the Empire's harsh realities. But he hadn't fully appreciated the psychological toll this took. The isolation his brother must have felt facing such situations without preparation or support. "I leave for Eridan in 3 days, Kakarot said after a moment. "My first deployment." Raditz's expression shifted, brotherly concern momentarily overtaking his personal turmoil. "Eridan. Frontier world, minimal Imperial presence. Good choice for a first mission." He studied Kakarot with newfound seriousness. "Father will be watching, but you'll still face your own decisions. Moments where theory meets reality." "I know." "No, you don't." Raditz placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. "But you will. And when that moment comes, when you're standing there with orders in one hand and your conscience in the other, remember what I'm telling you now. There are ways to satisfy both without destruction. Ways I didn't see until it was too late." This unexpected wisdom from his normally brash brother left Kakarot momentarily speechless. For years, he had viewed Raditz as the traditional Saiyan warrior, powerful, direct, uncomplicated in his approach to conquest. This glimpse of deeper reflection challenged that perception, suggesting growth through painful experience that Kakarot had yet to undergo. "I'll remember," he promised. Raditz nodded once, then removed his hand, his momentary vulnerability receding behind the typical Saiyan mask of stoic strength. "Get some rest. Your pre-deployment training with Caulifla starts soon. Doesn't it?" Kakarot couldn't hide his surprise. "How did you?" "Please," Raditz smirked, some of his usual confidence returning. "The whole lower quarter know. You two have been circling each other for months. Just be careful. Romantic entanglements before deployment are considered bad luck among veteran warriors." "It's not romantic," Kakarot protested automatically. Though something in his energy signature must have betrayed him, because Raditz's smirk only widened. "Tell yourself whatever you need to," his brother replied. "Just don't let it distract you when it matters. Eridan may seem like a routine assignment, but father's interest suggests otherwise. Stay focused." With that parting advice, Raditz descended from the terrace, leaving Kakarot alone with the night sky and his thoughts. Above him stretched the vast expanse of stars that comprised Frieza's empire, countless worlds conquered, controlled, or destroyed according to the tyrant's whims. Somewhere among them was Eridan, a small planet that would soon become the testing ground for everything he had learned over years of careful preparation. First deployment. First real test of his abilities beyond the protective boundaries of planet Vegeta. First opportunity to demonstrate that Bardock's unorthodox training methods had produced a warrior capable of navigating both combat challenges and the more complex moral terrain his brother had just described. As he contemplated these thoughts, Kakarot's senses detected a now familiar energy signature approaching the designated reigning location across the city, Caulifla, arriving early to prepare for their session. Her presence triggered something beyond the simple awareness of a fellow warrior, a complex response that combined respect, competitive drive, and something more personal that Saiyan culture provided few frameworks to understand. With one last look at the stars that would soon become much closer, Kakarot left the terrace to prepare for both the immediate challenge of training with Caulifla and the greater test that awaited on Eridan. The abandoned processing facility in Sector 7 had once served a SA purification center for captured atmospheric samples from conquered worlds. Now it stood empty, its cavernous interior stripped of valuable equipment but still structurally sound, an ideal location for training that required privacy from Imperial observation. When Kakarot arrived, Caulifla had already activated the facility's backup power systems, creating isolated pockets of illumination amid the industrial shadows. She stood in the central chamber, methodically stretching through a series of movements that combined traditional Saiyan warm-up techniques with modifications of her own design. "You're late," she observed without looking up, her enhanced senses having detected his approach long before he entered the chamber. "I was detained." Kakarot didn't elaborate on his conversation with Raditz, maintaining the Saiyan custom of keeping family matters private. "Have you secured the perimeter?" She gestured toward small devices positioned at strategic points throughout the facility. Modified scanner disruptors. Anyone monitoring this area will register only standard power fluctuations consistent with the facility's maintenance systems. Kakarot nodded approvingly. Like many young Saiyans with innovative tendencies, Caulifla had developed connections with the technical underclass that supported planet Vegeta's infrastructure, non-Saiyan specialists whose expertise was essential but rarely acknowledged in the warrior-dominated culture. These connections provided access to equipment and modifications not officially available to lower-ranking Saiyans. "What have you heard about Eridan's defenders?" he asked, beginning his own warm-up routine parallel to hers. "Minimal organized military presence," she replied, transitioning into more intensive movement patterns. Rival structure with distributed leadership. Their unusual energy manipulation appears primarily defensive rather than offensive. Force fields, environmental control, possibly some form of communication. This aligned with the information Bardock had shared, suggesting Caulifla had access to intelligence networks beyond standard deployment briefings. Her family, though classified as third tier in the Saiyan hierarchy, maintained connections across several planetary systems through trade relationships that supplemented their military service. Not much of a challenge for Saiyan warriors, Kakarot observed, deliberately adopting the typical assessment that would be expected in pre-deployment discussions. Caulifla shot him a knowing look, recognizing the public persona he was projecting. Perhaps not in direct combat. But assessment missions aren't just about conquering, are they? They're about understanding value, determining what's worth preserving and what's expendable to the Empire. The nuanced perspective revealed her own careful political awareness. Like Kakarot, Caulifla had developed beyond the simplistic conquest mentality that characterized many of their peers, recognizing the complex calculations that drove imperial decision-making. "Shall we begin?" Kakarot suggested, moving to the center of the chamber where the best lighting illuminated a clear training area. Caulifla nodded, retrieving a small device from her equipment bag. "I've been studying recorded data from Frontier World deployments. The energy signatures on Eridan share certain characteristics with techniques documented on Yardrat before it was restricted to Special Forces access." She activated the device, projecting holographic representations of energy pattern analyses into the space between them. "Notice these oscillation frequencies. They suggest manipulation of space-time fields rather than direct force projection." Kakarot studied the patterns with intense interest. Yardrat was rarely discussed in standard training. Its inhabitants had demonstrated abilities that Frieza's forces found concerning enough to place the entire planet under restricted access protocols after initial contact. If Eridan's population had independently developed similar techniques, it might explain both the Science Division's interest and Princess Echelot's personal involvement in the mission. "How did you obtain Yardrat data?" he asked, impressed despite himself. Such information was theoretically accessible only to elite commanders and specialized research divisions. A satisfied smile crossed Caulifla's face. "Let's just say that Imperial data security has certain vulnerabilities when accessed through subsidiary technical networks." In other words, she had contacts among the non-Saiyan technical specialists who maintained Frieza's information systems, another valuable connection in the complex web of relationships that existed beneath the Empire's seemingly monolithic structure. "If these patterns are accurate," Kakarot observed, "standard energy projection techniques might be ineffective against Eridan's defensive capabilities." "Precisely why we're going to practice alternatives," Caulifla confirmed. Deactivating the holographic display, hand-to-hand combat emphasizing precision strikes at energy nexus points, modified key manipulation to penetrate spatial distortion fields, and adaptive response techniques for unpredictable defense mechanisms. What followed was 3 hours of intensive training unlike anything practiced in official Saiyan combat sessions. Both young warriors had independently developed fighting styles that incorporated observations from across the galaxy, creating hybrid approaches that combined Saiyan power with tactical innovations drawn from dozens of conquered cultures. Together, they pushed each other to new levels of adaptation and creativity, preparing for challenges that standard deployment training would never address. As they worked, Kakarot found himself increasingly aware of Caulifla not just as a training partner but as a complete individual, her fierce intelligence expressing itself through combat innovation, her independence manifesting in techniques developed far from official oversight, her genuine passion for improvement transcending the simple aggression that drove many Saiyan warriors. "You're distracted," she observed during a brief recovery interval, tossing him a hydration pack. "Focus on the objective, not the opponent." The reprimand was professionally delivered, but something in her energy, Y's signature suggested she wasn't entirely unaffected by their prolonged proximity either. Saiyan adolescence brought physiological changes that intensified awareness between potential mates, a biologic reality that traditional warrior training acknowledged but deliberately subordinated to combat readiness. "Apologies," Kakarot replied formally, redirecting his focus to the technical challenges they were addressing. "The spatial disruption counter you demonstrated seems particularly relevant to Eridan's reported capabilities." Caulifla accepted this redirection with evident relief, launching into a detailed explanation of the technique she had developed based on fragmentary reports from previous encounters with similar defense systems. The remaining training time focused exclusively on practical preparation, both warriors maintaining the professional distance expected between squad members preparing for deployment. Only at the session's conclusion, as they were powering down the facility and removing evidence of their presence, did the carefully maintained boundary between them momentarily soften. "Kakarot," Caulifla said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "this mission. It matters to you beyond standard deployment objectives, doesn't it?" The question contained layers of meaning, personal interest, professional curiosity, and perhaps a tentative offering of alien CE beyond their official squad relationship. In the complex social hierarchy of planet Vegeta, such direct acknowledgement of special interests carried risk, suggesting priorities beyond Imperial service. Kakarot considered his response carefully. "Every warrior's first deployment defines aspects of their future path," he answered, truthful but deliberately incomplete. "That's not what I asked." Her dark eyes held his, demanding something beyond the practiced evasion he'd perfected over years of navigating dangerous political waters. The moment stretched between them, a test of trust as significant as any combat challenge they had faced. Bardock had always emphasized the importance of reliable allies, individuals whose goals aligned sufficiently with their own to justify measured disclosure. Caulifla had demonstrated intelligence, discretion, and independence that suggested potential value beyond a simple squad relationship. "My father believes Eridan may possess knowledge worth preserving," Kakarot finally said, choosing words that revealed direction without specific details. "Knowledge that might benefit Saiyan interests independent of Imperial objectives." It was the closest he had ever come to openly acknowledging the private agenda that shaped his family's actions, a significant risk, but one calculated to test Caulifla's response. Her reaction would determine whether RTHER trust might be possible or if professional distance needed to be maintained. She absorbed this partial confession without visible surprise, her energy signature revealing thoughtful consideration rather than alarm or rejection. "The Empire doesn't always prioritize what benefits Saiyans," she finally said, her own careful phrasing acknowledging the political delicacy of such distinctions. "Some of us have noticed the discrepancies between what strengthens our people and what serves Frieza's administrators." The implied alignment with his family's perspective was both unexpected and promising. Before Kakarot could respond, however, Caulifla continued in a more pragmatic tone. "Deployment begins in 2 days. Whatever objectives exist beyond official parameters, our priority remains survival and mission completion." She secured her equipment with practiced efficiency. "We should maintain standard protocols until we better understand the situation on Eridan." "Agreed," Kakarot confirmed, recognizing the wisdom in her caution. Though additional training before launch would be beneficial. "Tomorrow. Same location. 3rd hour after first sunrise." With that functional arrangement established, Caulifla departed with characteristic Saiyan abruptness, leaving Kakarot to complete the facility shutdown alone. As he made his way back through the darkened industrial sector toward home, Kakarot reflected on the complex web of relationships and objectives that surrounded the seemingly straightforward Eridan deployment. His father's interest in the planet's unique energy manipulation, Princess Echelot's observer role representing royal and scientific interests, Caulifla's unexpected alignment with concerns about Imperial versus Saiyan priorities, his brother Raditz S. warning about moral choices in field conditions. What had initially appeared to be a standard first deployment was revealing itself as something far more significant, a convergence of interests and agendas that might accelerate Bardock's long-term plans for eventual resistance against Frieza's domination. Whether this convergence represented opportunity or danger remained to be determined, but one thing was clear: Eridan would test more than just Kakarot's combat readiness. It would challenge his judgment, his values, and his ability to navigate competing loyalties in ways no training scenario could fully prepare him for. The launch bay hummed with pre-deployment activity as dawn broke over planet Vegeta's capital city. Technical crews performed final checks on assault pods, supple Y officers confirmed equipment manifests, and medical personnel conducted standard health verifications for departing warriors. Amid this orchestrated chaos, Bardock's 5-person squad gathered for final briefing before embarkation. Kakarot stood at attention alongside his fellow squad members: Caulifla, whose focused energy radiated calm readiness; Taro, a veteran warrior whose scarred face testified to decades of planetary conquests; Leek, a technical specialist whose combat record was less impressive but whose knowledge of alien infrastructure had proven valuable on previous missions; and Bardock himself, commanding with the quiet authority that had earned him respect despite his third-class designation. Standard formation upon planetary approach, Bardock instructed, indicating tactical projections on the briefing terminal. Taro and Leek will establish the forward base at these coordinates. Caulifla and Kakarot will conduct initial perimeter assessment focusing on these settlement clusters. I will manage central operations and coordinate with our observer. The reference to their observer drew the squad's attention to a figure who had just entered the launch bay: Princess Echelot, niece of King Vegeta and Science Division liaison. Unlike the ostentatious royal attire worn for court functions, she was dressed in practical field gear modified with subtle insignia indicating her dual status as both royal family member and scientific specialist. At perhaps 16 years old, Echelot carried herself with the confident authority that characterized Saiyan elite. Her features bore the sharp, aristocratic lines of the royal bloodline, but her eyes revealed an analytical intelligence rarely cultivated among warrior-focused nobility. Her hair, shorter than most female Ions, was secured in a practical style that emphasized function over tradition, another indication of her scientific orientation. "Commander Bardock," she acknowledged, approaching their briefing station. "I trust your squad is adequately prepared for this assessment mission." The formal greeting contained the expected hierarchical recognition: elite addressing third-class commander, but lacked the dismissive tone that often characterized such interactions. Bardock responded with appropriate deference without sacrificing his command authority. "Princess Echelot, we are prepared according to standard protocols with additional contingencies for the anomalous energy signatures identified by preliminary scans." Her gaze swept across the assembled squad, lingering briefly on Kakarot with an evaluative intensity that suggested prior knowledge of his capabilities. 2 cadets on their first deployment. An unusual choice for a frontier world assessment. Both have demonstrated exceptional aptitude in relevant training scenarios, Bardock replied evenly. Caulifla specializes in energy pattern analysis. Kakarot has shown particular skill in adaptive combat techniques suitable for unpredictable defense systems. Echelot nodded, accepting this explanation without further comment. "The Science Division has updated the mission parameters as of this morning," she said, transferring data to their briefing terminal. "Indigenous energy manipulation has been prioritized for comprehensive documentation before standard assessment protocols are completed. This adjustment, elevating technological evaluation above conquest considerations, was unusual for standard deployment. It confirmed Bardock's suspicion that Eridan's unique capabilities had attracted attention at the highest levels of Imperial administration. "Understood," Bardock acknowledged. "Our approach will be adjusted accordingly." The briefing continued with technical details and communication protocols, but Kakarot found his attention repeatedly drawn to Princess Echelot's interactions with his father. Unlike most elite-class Saiyans, who treated third-class warriors with barely concealed disdain, she engaged with Bardock as a respected professional, acknowledging his expertise while maintaining appropriate class distinction. This suggested either exceptional political skill or genuine recognition of his capabilities beyond official ranking. both potentially significant for their family's long-term objectives. When the briefing concluded, squad members moved toward their assigned assault pods for final preparations. Kakarot was securing his equipment when he sensed Echelot's approach, her energy signature controlled but purposeful. "Cadet Kakarot," she addressed him formally. "Your performance metrics from training assessments are inconsistent. Periods of exceptional achievement alternating with merely adequate results. An unusual pattern." The observation was accurately delivered but low. With unspoken implication. She had studied his records closely enough to detect the deliberate modulation of his abilities that Bardock had taught him to maintain. This level of scrutiny from a Royal family member confirmed that his activities had attracted higher attention than previously believed. "Training focuses on different skills at different times, Princess," Kakarot responded neutrally. "Some align better with my natural abilities than others." Her expression remained unreadable, but something in her energy shifted, not hostility or suspicion, but a subtle recalibration of assessment. Indeed, adaptation to varying challenges is essential for effective field operations. She paused, then added with deliberate casualness, "Your occasional training sessions with my cousin have been noted in your record. Prince Vegeta rarely requests repeat engagements with lower-class warriors." The statement hung in the air between them, not quite a question, but clearly inviting explanation. Kakarot maintained his composed exterior while calculating the optimal response. Acknowledging special status could trigger additional scrutiny, dismissing the connection might appear suspiciously humble. "The prince appreciates unpredictable combat approaches," he finally offered. "My father's training emphasizes tactical variation over standard patterns." Echelot studied him for a moment longer, then nodded slightly. "An efficient perspective. I look forward to observing its application on Eridan." With that cryptic comment, she moved away toward the command pod where she would travel alongside Bardock. As final launch preparations were announced, Kakarot exchanged a brief glance with Caulifla, whose position nearby had allowed her to overhear the exchange. Her expression communicated silent confirmation of what they both recognized. Princess Echelot's interest extended beyond standard scientific observation. Whatever they discovered on Eridan would be evaluated not just for imperial cataloging but through the lens of royal family interests, a distinct and potentially significant third perspective beyond Frieza's administrators and Bardock's private agenda. The implications of this added complexity remained unclear as Kakarot settled into his assault pod and initiated the pre-launch sequence. The small, spherical craft represented standard Saiyan deployment technology, efficient, practical, and designed primarily for combat insertion rather than comfort. As the pod sealed around him, life support systems activating automatically, Kakarot centered himself for the journey ahead. First planetary deployment, royal observation, unusual energy technologies, his brother's warning about moral choices in the field. Each element added layers of challenge beyond the standard mission parameters. Yet beneath these complexities lay the fundamental reality that had shaped his development since childhood. This was another step in Bardock's carefully orchestrated preparatio. For eventual resistance against Frieza's empire, a testing ground for capabilities that might someday serve larger purposes than conquest. The launch countdown completed, and Kakarot's pod shot upward through planet Vegeta's atmosphere, joining the formation of 5 craft accelerating toward deep space. As his homeworld diminished behind him, Kakarot focused on the journey ahead, not just to Eridan, but toward the uncertain future his father had glimpsed in fragmented visions and spent years preparing him to navigate. Space travel in standard assault pods balanced efficiency with biological necessity. The 3-day journey to Eridan passed in alternating cycles of induced hibernation and active preparation, a rhythm designed to deliver warriors at peak readiness while conserving limited resources. During active periods, Kakarot reviewed mission data, studied planetary specifications, and mentally rehearsed combat scenarios based on the fragmentary intelligence available about Eridan's unusual energy manipulation capabilities. The final approach came during his 3rd active cycle. The POD's communication system activated with a soft chime, Bardock's voice coming through with characteristic precision. Atmospheric entry in 20 minutes. Final briefing. The small screen within the pod displayed a tactical overlay of their landing zone, a sparsely populated region of Eridan's northern continent. selected for its proximity to energy signature anomalies while maintaining distance from major settlement clusters. Updated scans indicate minimal defensive preparations at the designated coordinates. Bardock continued. Standard insertion protocol with modifications for potential energy interference. Maintain communication discipline through initial assessment phase. The briefing proceeded with technical details about atmospheric composition, gravity variations, and indigenous biological hazards, standard information for any planetary deployment, but delivered the focused attention to detail that characterized Bardock's command style. Beneath the procedural instructions, Kakarot detected subtle emphasis on observation and documentation priorities that aligned with their private objectives beyond imperial requirements. As the pods entered Eridan's upper atmosphere, external sensors transmitted the first direct images of the planet's surface. Unlike the harsh red landscape of planet Vegeta, Eridan presented in vibrant blues and greens, a world rich with vegetation and water, its topography characterized by rolling highlands and intricate river systems that suggested minimal tectonic activity. Visual scans identified scattered settlement clusters connected by primitive roadways, with larger population concentrations distributed primarily along coastal regions. The assault pods separated into predetermined approach vectors, each targeting specific landing coordinates within a 5-kilometer operational zone. Kakarot's trajectory took him toward the southwestern quadrant, where preliminary scans had detected unusual energy fluctuations inconsistent with the visible technology level of nearby settlements. Entry deceleration pressed him against the POD's restraint system as atmospheric friction transformed the craft's exterior into a momentary fireball, a standard arrival announcement that eliminated any possibility of covert insertion. Saiyan deployment protocols rarely prioritized stealth. The psychological impact of fiery descent from the heavens served the Empire's interests by demonstrating overwhelming technological superiority to primitive populations. Impact came with practiced precision, the POD's automated systems absorbing kinetic energy while maintaining structural integrity. As dust and debris settled around the small crater created by his arrival, Kakarot performed standard post-landing checks, atmospheric composition verification, gravity calibration, and energy signature scanning to detect immediate threats or surveillance. Finding no concerning readings, he activated the POD's opening mechanism. The hatch released with a pneumatic hiss, revealing Eridan's environment in direct sensory detail beyond what instruments could convey. The air carried complex organic scents, vegetation, soil minerals, and subtle biological markers indicating diverse ecosystem components. Gravity registered at approximately 0.9 of planet Vegeta's standard, a minor difference that would slightly enhance physical capabilities without requiring significant adaptation. Most striking was the quality of light, softer than Vegeta's harsh red illumination. Filtered through an atmosphere rich in moisture and particulate matter that created a distinctive haze on the distant horizon. The landing site itself was a clearing within dense vegetation, likely created by natural processes rather than indigenous development. Kakarot emerged from the pod, immediately establishing defensive positioning while conducting more detailed environmental assessment. His scouter, standard equipment for all deployed warriors, provided tactical data overlay, identifying the landing positions of other squad members and highlighting energy signatures that warranted attention. Southwestern quadrant secure, he reported through the communication system integrated into his scouter. No immediate indigenous presence detected. Local flora shows minimal response to landing impact. Similar reports came in from other squad members as they established the initial perimeter. Taro confirmed the central landing zone clear for base establishment. Leak reported atmospheric composition within standard parameters with higher oxygen content than typical for inhabited worlds at this development stage. Khalifla noted unusual energy readings from vegetation samples, subtle but measurable power signatures that suggested planet-wide bioenergetic integration beyond normal evolutionary patterns. Bardock's voice provided central coordination, forward base activation in progress. Princess Echelot will establish scientific monitoring parameters. Perimeter teams proceed with initial survey according to assigned vectors. Maintain standard alert protocols for first contact scenarios. For Kakarot and Khalifla, these instructions translated to a systematic exploration of the southwestern quadrant, a 5-kilometer sector containing 3 small Element clusters and several energy anomalies flagged by orbital scans. Moving with practiced efficiency, they secured their landing pods with standard countermeasures, activated locator beacons for emergency extraction, and began their survey pattern through the dense forest surrounding the landing zone. Energy signatures are unusual, Caulifla observed as they advanced, her scouter modify. Ed with specialized sensors she had acquired through her technical connections. The plants aren't just living organisms, they're conducting power through some kind of network. Kakarot extended his Eternal key sensing abilities beyond technological measurement, detecting the subtle energy patterns his father had trained him to perceive. It feels almost like consciousness, he noted, but distributed rather than centralized. Like the entire ecosystem as a single organism communicating with itself. This observation aligned with fragmented reports from other frontier worlds where similar phenomena had been documented, planets where life had evolved along paths that emphasized connection and cooperation rather than the competitive individual development that characterized most inhabited worlds. Such evolutionary patterns were rare but significant, often producing capabilities that imperial science classified as anomalous because they operated outside standard energy utilization models. Their advance through the forest revealed increasingly complex biological structures, vegetation that responded to their presence with subtle movements, fungal networks that illuminated briefly as they passed, aerial spores that seemed to transmit information through patterns of movement rather than chemical signals. None presented immediate threat, but the cumulative effect created an inescapable sense of being observed by the environment itself rather than individual organisms within it. The settlement should be just beyond that ridge, Caulifla indicated, referencing topographical data on her scouter display. Approximately 200 individuals according to heat signature scans. Minimal technological infrastructure. They approached with tactical caution, maintaining cover while establishing observation positions that provided clear sight lines to the indigenous dwelling clusters. The settlement itself presented a stark contrast to Saiyan architectural approaches, instead of MPO-Sing structures demonstrating dominance over natural surroundings. These buildings integrated seamlessly with the environment, incorporating living vegetation and natural formations into functional spaces that blurred the distinction between constructed and organic elements. The inhabitants moved through this integrated landscape with evident comfort, humanoid figures of similar proportional street structure to Saiyans but with distinctive physiological differences. Their skin displayed subtle bioluminescent patterns that seemed to shift in response to emotional or communicative needs. Their movements carried a fluid grace that suggested different muscular organization optimized for their specific environmental conditions. Most significantly, their interactions with the surrounding ecosystem demonstrated the energy manipulation capabilities that had drawn imperial attention. Simple gestures produced responses from vegetation, branches bending to create shelters, fruits detaching and floating toward collectors, water flowing through living conduits to desired locations. These manipulations occurred without visible technology, suggesting direct bioenergetic communication between inhabitants and environment. Impressive, Caulifla murmured, documenting the observations through her scouter's recording function. Not key projection as we understand it, but something more, integrated. They're not forcing energy to obey them, they're participating in existing energy flows. Kakarot nodded, recognizing the distinction. Traditional Saiyan energy manipulation involved domination, force and G-key to conform to warrior will through disciplined control. This approach demonstrated partnership, inhabitants working within established energy patterns to create cooperative outcomes. The philosophical difference was as significant as the technical variation. We should report these initial observations before attempting contact, he suggested, though something in his tone conveyed reluctance to disrupt the harmonious scene before them. Caulifla seemed to share this hesitation, her usual aggressive approach to mission objectives temporarily subdued by what they were witnessing. Agreed. This deserves careful documentation before standard protocols proceed. As they prepared to withdraw to a secure communication position, however, an unexpected development forced immediate reassessment. A child from the settlement, smaller than the others but with more vibrant bioluminescent patterning, had separated from the main group and was moving directly toward their observation position, F. Following no visible path but advancing with confident purpose as if responding to some form of detection beyond standard sensory awareness. We've been noticed, Kakarot observed, immediately evaluating tactical options. Standard protocol would dictate immediate withdrawal to avoid premature contact before full assessment was complete. Yet such retreat might trigger community-wide alarm responses. That could complicate subsequent mission phases. Not by conventional means, Caulifla added, indicating her scouter readings. No technology detecting us, they must be sensing our energy directly through the environmental network. This capability represented a significant tactical consideration. If the indigenous population could detect energy signatures through planetary biological systems, conventional Saiyan stealth approaches would prove ineffective. The implications extended beyond immediate mission parameters to potential defensive capabilities against standard conquest techniques. The child continued advancing, now close enough that withdrawal without detection had become impossible. Facial features became visible, large, iris-less eyes adapted for the filtered light conditions of their forested environment. And expressive features currently displaying what appeared to be curiosity rather than alarm. Decision point, Caulifla stated simply, acknowledging the need for immediate action. Kakarot weighed options against mission parameters and his father's broader objectives. Standard protocol would prioritize intimidation upon discovery, establishing immediate dominance to facilitate subsequent assessment. Yet such approach might trigger defensive responses that would obscure the very energy manipulation capabilities they had been sent to evaluate. We adapt, he decided, stepping forward into visible position while maintaining non-threatening posture. First contact protocols with emphasis on observation rather than dominance display. Caulifla raised an eyebrow at this unusual approach but followed his lead, moving into position beside him as the child reached the edge of their observation area. For a moment, all three figures remained motionless, two Saiyan warriors in standard battle gear facing a small indigenous child whose skin patterns shifted through cycles of blue and green luminescence. Then, with startling directness, the child spoke, the words. Incomprehensible but the cadence suggesting clear communication attempt rather than alarm vocalization. More surprising, the surrounding vegetation responded to this speech, creating subtle movement. Patterns that seemed to amplify or elaborate upon the auditory components. Kakarot's scouter activated automatically, language processing algorithms attempting to establish translation parameters from this initial sample. While insufficient for immediate comprehension, the system indicated basic linguistic structures compatible with standard translation protocols given sufficient exposure. We acknowledge your greeting, Kakarot responded in clear, measured tones designed to provide optimal input for the child's reciprocal language processing, assuming comparable cognitive capabilities. He accompanied this with the universal open hand gesture recognized across hundreds of worlds as indicating non-hostile intent. The child's luminescent patterns intensified, and what might have been a smile transformed their features. More words followed, accompanied by gestures toward the settlement behind them, unmistakably an invitation rather than a warning or threat. Before Kakarot could determine appropriate response, his scouter chimed with incoming communication from Bardock. Perimeter team, report status. Energy fluctuations detected in your sector. The formal phrasing indicated Prink's echelon was likely monitoring the channel, necessitating protocol-compliant communication regardless of actual circumstances. Indigenous contact initiated, Kakarot reported precisely. Single juvenile subject, non-threatening approach, preliminary communication attempted, awaiting instructions. A brief pause followed, Bardock likely consulting with Princess Echelot regarding proper procedure for this unexpected development. Standard assessment protocols typically delayed direct contact until comprehensive environmental and technological evaluation was complete, but the circumstances had rendered such approach impossible. Maintain position, Bardock finally responded. Primary team redirecting to your coordinates for full contact protocols. Estimated arrival 15 minutes. GAT, her maximum linguistic data without entering settlement perimeter. The instructions represented reasonable compromise between standard procedure and practical necessity, allowing continued observatio. While preparing for formal contact under supervised conditions. Kakarot acknowledged the order and returned attention to the indigenous child, who had been waiting with remarkable patience during this exchange. More of us will arrive soon, Kakarot communicated through simplified speech and gestures, while his scouter continued gathering linguistic data to improve translation capability. We wish to learn about your people. Whether through the developing translation algorithm or some form of energy-based understanding, the child seemed to comprehend at least partially. They responded with what appeared to be agreement, then settled comfortably onto the forest floor, a clear indication of willingness to wait for the others to arrive. More surprising, the vegetation around them shifted configuration, creating natural seating formations that suggested the Saiyan visitors might also wish to rest during the waiting period. This casual manipulation of the environment without visible Forder technology confirmed the advanced bioenergetic integration that had attracted Imperial interest. Caulifla and Kakarot exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the significance of what they were witnessing. Without discussion, they accepted the offered seating, a departure from standard protocol that would typically maintain formal alert posture during all indigenous interactions. This SMA-LL accommodation represented practical adaptation to local conditions while facilitating the observation that constituted their primary mission objective. As they waited for Bardock and Princess Echelot to arrive, Kakarot found himself increasingly drawn to the harmonious relationship between the indigenous child and their environment. Unlike conquered populations who typically viewed Saiyan arrivals with terror or hostile resistance, this young being displayed genuine curiosity without apparent fear, suggesting either naivete regarding potential threats or confidence in protective capabilities beyond visible evidence. The forest around them pulsed with subtle energy exchanges, the integrated network responding to the child's emotional states with shifts in luminescence and configuration. Kakarot's trained senses detected these patterns with growing appreciation for their complexity, recognition that they were observing not primitive manipulation but sophisticated symbiosis beyond any thing in standard Imperial classification systems. Ask about the energy, Caulifla suggested quietly, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding standard mission protocols. Kakarot nodded. The N attempted to formulate the concept through combination of basic terms and gestures. Your plants, how do you speak with them? He accompanied this with mimicry of the child's earlier interaction with the vegetation. The child's luminescent patterns brightened with what appeared to be enthusiasm for the topic. Their response came in a stream of words punctuated by expressive gestures toward various elements of the surrounding ecosystem. The Scouter translation remained fragmentary but suggested concepts involving connection, wholeness, and flow rather than the command and control terminology that characterized Saiyan energy manipulation discussions. Before more detailed exchange could develop, movement in the forest announced the arrival of Bardock's team. The commander emerged first, his experienced gaze immediately assessing the situation with tactical precision. Princess Echelot followed, her attention divided between the indigenous child and the responsive environment surrounding them. The child showed no alarm at these additional arrivals, suggesting either remarkable composure or lack of threat perception capability. Their luminescent patterns shifted to acknowledge the newcomers, but their primary attention remained focused on Kakarot, with whom they had established initial communication. Report, Bardock instructed simply, maintaining formal command presence APRO. Create for Princess Echelot's observation. Kakarot provided precise summary of the encounter, emphasizing the apparent environmental integration capabilities and non-threatening approach. The subject court appears to be functioning as community representative despite juvenile status, he concluded. Possible significance regarding social structure or special capability designation. Princess Echelot stepped forward, her scientific interest evident beneath maintained royal composure. The bioluminescent patterning suggests advanced neural environmental integration, she observed. Consistent with H-energy signature anomalies detected in orbital scans. She activated specialized scanning equipment more sophisticated than standard Scouter technology, science division instruments designed for detailed analysis rather than tactical assessment. Fascinating. The child is functioning as a biological transmitter within a planet-wide network. Not controlling the environment, participating in it. This technical confirmation of their initial observations carried significant implications for mission objectives. Standard Imperial assessment categorized planetary populations by technological development, resource utilization capability, and potential threat level to Imperial expansion. Eridan's inhabitants presented a classification challenge, limited conventional technology but advanced RGETIC integration that might represent either valuable resource or concerning defense capability. Bardock turned to Princess Echelot with formal deference appropriate to their respective positions. Your assessment, Princess. Do circumstances warrant adjusted contact protocols? The question acknowledged her authority while seeking practical guidance for immediate actions. Her response would determine whether standard intimidation display would proceed or alternative approach might be authorized given the unusual circumstances. Princess Echelot studied the indigenous child for several moments, her expression revealing the analytical assessment occurring behind royal composure. Standard protocols seem suboptimal for these specific conditions, she finally concluded. I authorize adaptive approach emphasizing information gathering over dominance establishment. The science division requires comprehensive understanding of these energy manipulation capabilities before standard assessment proceeds. This authorization, technically within her authority as science division liaison but representing significant departure from typical imperial procedure, created operational flexibility that aligned with Bardock's unspoken objectives. Information gathering prioritization would allow detailed documentation of Eridan's unique capabilities before any destructive conquest phases might be initiated. Acknowledged. Bardock confirmed, then issued precise instructions to his squad. Establish communication perimeter. Kakarot will continue primary indigenous interaction with Caulifla as secondary. Taro and Leek maintain security positions with emphasis on environmental monitoring. All observations channeled through primary recording systems. The formal orders established per procedure for Princess Echelot's benefit while creating the information gathering opportunity that served multiple agendas, imperial science, Bardock's private objectives, and the practical missio. Requirements of comprehensive assessment. As the squad implemented these instructions, Kakarot returned attention to the indigenous child, who had observed these exchanges with apparent interest despite language barriers. The Scouter translation algorithm had continued processing during their discussion, now offering improved interpretation capability for basic concepts. We come from beyond your world, Kakarot explained, using simplified terms optimized for translation. We wish to understand how you communicate with your environment. The translation must have achieved reasonable accuracy, as the child's response registered as coherent concepts rather than fragmentary terms. All connection welcomes new voices, came the approximate translation. You bodies carry different song but still part of great pattern. This philosophical response, suggesting perception of Saiyans as disconnected participants in some larger energetic whole rather than alien invaders, represented perspective entirely outside standard imperial encounter categories. Most primitive populations responded to Saiyan arrival with either terror or aggression, this calm inclusion in some greater conceptual framework represented unprecedented first contact dynamics. The great pattern, Kakarot repeated, seeking clarification. Your connection with plants and animals. All things, the child corrected, luminescent patterns emphasizing this expansion. Stone, water, air, growth, bodies, light, all connected in pattern flow. Your people have forgotten connection, carry isolated energy instead of shared flow. Princess Echelot moved closer, her scientific interest evidently overriding royal protocol regarding direct engagement with primitive subjects. They're detecting our key signatures but interpreting them as aberrant energy patterns. She observed with fascination. To them, our individualized power represents disconnection from some greater energetic whole. This assessment aligned with Kakarot's growing understanding of the fundamental philosophical difference underlying Eridan's unique capabilities. Where Saiyan warrior culture emphasized individual power development and domination of external forces, this civilization had evolved toward integration and cooperation with existing energy systems, producing capabilities that appeared magical by conventional standards but represented entirely different developmental path. Can you show us this connection? Kakarot asked the child, making deliberate gesture toward the responsive vegetation surrounding them. The child's expression brightened, luminescent patterns intensifying with apparent enthusiasm for sharing this fundamental aspect of their existence. Without hesitation, they extended a small hand toward Kakarot in clear invitation for physical contact, a gesture that triggered immediate tactical reassessment from the observing Saiyan squad. Standard protocol would prohibit direct physical contact with indigenous subjects during initial assessment phase, both for security considerations and contamination prevention. Yet this situation had already moved beyond standard parameters, with Princess Echelot's authorization C. Reading operational flexibility that permitted adaptive response. Bardock gave subtle nod, indicating permission for this irregular procedure while maintaining alert posture that acknowledged potential risk. Princess Echelot activated additional scanning protocols on her specialized equipment, preparing to document whatever energy exchange might occur. Kakarot accepted the offered hand, estably shing physical contact while maintaining heightened awareness of his own energy patterns, ready to disengage instantly if any threatening manipulation was detected. The moment of connection produced immediate and extraordinary response. Where the child's skin contacted his, luminescent patterns extended beyond their physical boundary, creating delicate energy tracery that flowed across Kakarot's hand and up his arm. The sensation wasn't invasive or controlling, instead conveying impression of gentle introduction, as if two fundamentally different systems were establishing communication protocols. More remarkable was the corresponding response from surrounding vegetation. Plants nearest their connected hands began subtle movement, not the directed manipulation observed earlier but synchronous motion suggesting reaction to the energy exchange occurring between Saiyan and indigenous physiologies. Extraordinary, Princess Echelot murmured, her royal composure momentarily forgotten as scientific fascination took precedence. They're creating direct bioenergetic interface between incompatible systems. The child is functioning as translation mechanism between your individualized key signature and their environmental network. Quote, Kakarot experienced this technical assessment as subjective sensation, awareness of energy flowing not just within his own body but extending outward, connecting momentarily with patterns that existed beyond individual boundaries. The experience wasn't consciousness transfer in any meaningful sense, but rather brief participation in perception framework entirely different from Saiyan understanding of power and its applications. Through this connection, fragmentary impressions formed in his awareness, not coherent communication but sensory glimpses of essence experienced through Eridan's integrated consciousness. The fundamental harmony of planetary systems. The constant flow of energy between seemingly separate components. The perception of Saiyan visitors as intensely concentrated energy nodes, powerful but isolated, separated from the greater whole that sustained all life on this world. When the child withdrew their hand, ending the connection, Kakarot required momentary reorientation to standard perceptual framework. The experience had lasted perhaps 30 seconds by objective measurement, yet contained subjective depth that challenged immediate integration with normal awareness. What did you perceive? Princess Echelot asked immediately, her scientific protocols demanding documentation while experience remained fresh. Kakarot provided precise description of subjective impressions while his scouter recorded physiological responses for later analysis. Throughout this technical debriefing, he maintained awareness of deeper significance beyond imperial classification interests, recognition that Eridan's energy manipulation represented not just tactical capability but fundamentally different relationship with power itself. Bardock observed this exchange with careful neutrality, his commander persona revealing nothing of potential strategic implications this discovery might present for their private objectives. Yet Kakarot, attuned to his father's subtle energy fluctuations through years of training, detected the controlled excitement beneath professional composure, recognition that they had encountered something potentially transformative. As formal documentation continued, the indigenous child rose from their seated position with fluid grace that emphasized their evolutionary adaptation to this environment. Through improving translation algorithms, they communicated invitation for the visitors to accompany them to the main settlement, a significant development that would accelerate assessment timeline beyond standard protocol but provide valuable direct observation opportunity. Princess Echelot assumed her authority role, considering this invitation against imperial procedures and scientific objectives. The opportunity for comprehensive documentation outweighs procedural concerns, she decided. We will accept this invitation with appropriate security measures. Bardock issued corresponding orders, establishing movement formation that balanced protection requirements with non-threatening appearance appropriate to information gathering priority. As the squad prepared to accompany their young guide toward the settlement, Kakarot found himself unusually affected by the encounter, not just intellectually intrigued by technological implications but philosophically challenged by the alternative relationship with power that Eridan's civilization had developed. Throughout his training, Bardock had emphasized that resistance against Frieza's empire would require more than simply superior combat capability. It would demand fundamentally different approaches to power itself, perspective that transcended the limitations of both Saiyan tradition and imperial doctrine. In Eridan's bioenergetic integration, Kakarot glimpsed potential pathway towards such alternative, not through greater destructive capability but through more sophisticated understanding of energy's connective rather than dominating potential. As they moved through the living forest toward the settlement, vegetation responding to their indigenous guide with subtle accommodations that created optimal pathway, Kakarot exchanged meaningful glance with Caulifla. Her expression confirmed shared recognition of this encounter's significance beyond standard mission parameters, appreciation that they were witnessing something might influence not just immediate objectives but longer-term understanding of power and its applications. Princess Echelot maintained constant documentation through her specialized equipment, her scientific focus temporarily superseding political considerations. Bardock directed tactical movements with experienced precision while gathering observations that would inform later strategic analysis. The remaining squad members maintained security protocols appropriate to unfamiliar environment, alert for potential threats despite the seemingly peaceful circumstances. Through this complex interplay of official mission requirements, scientific documentation, and private strategic assessment, the Saiyan delegation advanced toward deeper engagement with Eridan's unique civilization, an encounter that would challenge standard imperial classification systems and, perhaps, offer glimpses of alternative paths forward in the greater galactic context that Bardock had been quietly preparing to navigate for more than a decade. The settlement appeared through forest canopy as they approached, integrated living structures that blurred boundaries between constructed and organic elements. Indigen Aus inhabitants moved through this environment with practiced harmony, their activities synchronized with natural systems rather than imposed upon them. Energy flowed visibly through community spaces, bioluminescent patterns connecting individuals, structures, and surrounding ecosystem in constant communication network. As they entered this living community under guidance of their young escort, Kakarot experienced profound recognition that standard imperial assessment categories would prove fundamentally inadequate for what they were witnessing. Eridan presented not just unusual technological approach but entirely different relationship with environment and energy, civilization developed through cooperation rather than dominance, strength expressed through connection rather than individual power. The implications of this alternative developmental path extended far beyond immediate mission objectives, potentially offering insights relevant to Bardock's long-term vision of Saiyan liberation from imperial constraints. As Kakarot prepared for deeper engagement with this unique culture, he maintained careful balance between official assessment responsibilities and private recognition of potential significance for future challenges that awaited beyond this frontier world. Whatever discoveries remained ahead on Eridan, one reality had already been established: the universe contained more pathways to power than Frieza's empire acknowledged or Saiyan tradition recognized. In this recognition lay seeds of possibility that transcended standard conquest protocols and offered glimpses of alternative futures beyond current imperial constraints. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, The Tournament of Pride. Seasons changed differently on conquered worlds. On Eridan, the passing of 3 planet Aries cycles had transformed lush forests into crystalline gardens where bioluminescent flora hibernated beneath translucent shells, the ecosystem adapting to the natural rhythm of the world's distant sun. On planet Vegeta, 3 years had brought different transformations, political tensions, shifting alliances, and the gradual refinement of warriors prepared for greater challenges. Kakarot stood at the edge of the royal training grounds, his 14-year-old frame having grown into the proportions of a young warrior. No longer the curious child who first discovered ki sensing beneath his father's tutelage. He now carried himself with the focused presence of a Saiyan approaching the crucial transition to adult status. His movements remained fluid rather than brutish, his power controlled rather than flaunted, distinguishing characteristics in a culture that increasingly valued spectacle over substance. "He's late," Caulifla noted beside him, her own adolescent development evident in refined musculature that complemented her natural Saiyan strength. At 14, she had established herself as one of the most promising female warriors of their generation, her reputation built through successful deployments and innovative combat approaches rather than political connections. The prince maintains his own schedule, Kakarot replied evenly, though he shared her impatience. Their presence at the royal training facility represented unusual privilege for warriors of their class, a recognition of capabilities that transcended traditional hierarchical limitations. In the 3 years since their revelatory mission to Eridan, much had changed in their respective positions within Saiyan society. The unusual energy manipulation techniques they had documented, and partially integrated into their own fighting styles, had attracted attention from both the science division and higher military echelons. Princess Echelot's comprehensive report had elevated their status from promising cadets to specialists in frontier world assessment, leading to additional deployments where their particular observational skills proved valuable to imperial interests. More significantly, their encounter with Eridan's cooperative energy systems had fundamentally influenced their development as warriors. Where most Saiyans continued to pursue raw power output through traditional methods, Kakarot and Caulifla had incorporated principles of energy flow and environmental awareness that dramatically enhanced their combat effectiveness. These adaptations, carefully presented as tactical innovations rather than philosophical divergence, had established them as unusually effective field operatives despite their youth. "It's not the delay that concerns me," Caulifla continued, keeping her voice low enough that the royal guards positioned at strategic intervals couldn't overhear. "It's the timing of this whole tournament. Why now? Why this format? Something doesn't align with standard imperial protocols." Her suspicion was justified. The sudden announcement of the Tournament of Pride, a competition for young Saiyan warriors between 14 and 16 years old, had surprised even Bardock's well-connected information network. Frieza himself had authorized the event, purportedly to celebrate the exceptional development of Saiyan youth and identify promising assets for specialized deployment. The language was standard imperial propaganda, but the unprecedented nature of the competition suggested deeper objectives beyond public justification. "My father believes it's an evaluation mechanism," Kakarot replied, carefully monitoring their surroundings for surveillance. "The Empire has grown too large for traditional oversight methods. Frieza needs more efficient ways to identify potential threats and assets." The tournament structure supported this assessment. Unlike traditional Saiyan combat demonstrations that emphasized pure destructive output, this competition would evaluate adaptability, strategic thinking, and performance under varied conditions, qualities more relevant to complex field operations than simple conquest missions. The announced presence of Frieza himself as observer reinforced the significance beyond standard imperial talent assessment. Their conversation ceased as the massive doors to the inner training facility swung open, revealing Prince Vegeta accompanied by his constant shadow, Commander Nappa. At 16, the prince had developed into the epitome of Saiyan royal lineage, compact but powerful physique, sharp features perpetually set in proud disdain, and energy signature that radiated controlled aggression. His reputation had grown alongside his power, with successful deployment records that emphasized efficiency and tactical precision rather than the wanton destruction typical of many Saiyan operations. "Begin warm-up sequences," the prince commanded without preamble, his imperious tone perfectly calibrated to maintain hierarchical distance while acknowledging their presence as worthy training partners. Level 4 Combat Simulation, Variable Gravity Conditions. The instruction confirmed this session's purpose, preparation for specific tournament conditions that had been announced in preliminary briefings. Variable gravity environments would feature prominently in the competition, testing warriors' adaptability to conditions they might encounter across Frieza's diverse empire. As they moved into the designated training area, Kakarot maintained awareness of the complex dynamics at play. These occasional sessions with Prince Vegeta represented dangerous opportunity, chance to exchange techniques and perspectives across class boundaries while risking unwelcome scrutiny from those who monitored the royal heir's development. Each interaction required careful calculation of what could be revealed versus what must remain hidden. The training facility activated around them, gravity generators creating localized fields of varying intensity. Prince Vegeta moved immediately to the highest density zone, twice standard gravity, while gesturing for them to occupy adjacent sectors. The implied challenge was clear. Demonstrate adaptability or confirm lower class limitations. Caulifla responded with characteristic directness, stepping into a zone calibrated at 1.8 standard gravity without visible effort adjustment. Her energy distribution shifted subtly to compensate for increased resistance, a technique they had developed based on principles observed on Eridan, where indigenous inhabitants naturally modify their bioenergetic fields to harmonize with environmental conditions. Kakarot chose a different approach, deliberately selecting a variable zone where gravity fluctuated unpredictably between 0.5 and 2.2 times standard. This represented greater technical challenge but offered opportunity to demonstrate adaptation capabilities that would be relevant in the upcoming competition. As the field intensified around him, he modified his key circulation patterns to create internal counter-pressure, not fighting against environmental conditions but establishing complementary resistance that maintained operational stability regardless of external changes. Prince Vegeta observed these choices with calculating attention, his expression revealing nothing while his energy signature betrayed fleeting interest in their distinct approaches. Without comment, he began a series of complex combat forms that emphasized precision rather than raw power, movements designed to maintain perfect execution regardless of gravitational resistance. The three warriors proceeded through increasingly demanding sequences, each demonstrating specialized techniques while observing others' innovations. This exchange, conducted without explicit acknowledgement, represented rare cooperation across hierarchical boundaries, temporary alliance of capability rather than class that would dissolve once they left the training facility. After 30 minutes of intensive warm-up, Prince Vegeta signaled transition to direct combat simulation. Alternating engagements, he instructed. Full contact with power limitation protocols active. Caulifla first. The specification of power limitations, technology that prevented energy projection above certain thresholds, emphasized this session's focus on technique rather than destructive capacity. Within these constraints, victory would depend on tactical innovation and adaptability rather than simple overwhelming force, precisely the conditions anticipated in the tournament's advanced stages. Caulifla stepped forward, settling into her characteristic stance, a modified version of traditional Saiyan combat positioning that incorporated greater flexibility and reduced target profile. Facing Prince Vegeta in the central training area, she activated her personal limitation field, a blue energy signature confirming compliance with safety protocols. Begin, commanded Nappa from the observation position, initiating the automated monitoring systems that would record performance metrics for later analysis. What followed demonstrated the evolution of Saiyan combat beyond traditional approaches. Prince Vegeta attacked with royal precision, each movement economical, powerful, and tactically sound. His style embodied generations of elite Saiyan techniques, refined specialized training and practical deployment experience. Yet within this technical perfection lay predictability, adherence to established patterns that prioritized overwhelming force application over innovative adaptation. Caulifla countered with the hybrid style she had developed since Eridan, foundation of Saiyan strength enhanced by concepts of energy flow and environmental integration. Vegeta sought to dominate space through power projection, she manipulated spatial relationships themselves, creating unusual angles of approach and retreat that disrupted standard response patterns. Her movements incorporated observed techniques from a dozen conquered species, combined into seamless approach that defied categorization within standard combat databases. Their engagement escalated through increasingly complex exchanges, each fighter testing the other's adaptability while seeking exploitable patterns. Prince Vegeta maintained slight advantage through superior raw speed and power. But Caulifla's unconventional approach prevented decisive victory, extending the match beyond expected duration for such hierarchical disparity. From observation position, Kakarot analyzed both fighters with trained precision. Vegeta's style remained fundamentally unchanged since their first encounter years ago, technically perfect but philosophically limited by adherence to domination principle. That defined traditional Saiyan combat. Caulifla's approach had evolved dramatically, incorporating elements from each deployment while maintaining core identity that emphasized flow over force. Contrast represented precisely the distinction Bardock had emphasized in private training, between power that conquered and power that adapted. After 7 minutes of intensive exchange, Nappa signaled conclusion. Both fighters disengaged immediately, Saiyan discipline overriding combat momentum despite elevated heart rates and activated combat hormones. Performance metrics displayed on monitory. Ing stations indicated statistical draw, unusual outcome when royal combatant engaged lower-class warrior, regardless of technical specifications. Acceptable adaptation to gravitational variance, Prince Vegeta assessed coldly. Though subtle energy fluctuation revealed greater impression than verbal acknowledgement suggested. Unorthodox approach creates initial advantage but becomes predictable with sufficient exposure. Caulifla accepted this critique with appropriate deference, though Kakarot detected the carefully suppressed satisfaction beneath her composed expression. Even qualified recognition from the prince represented significant achievement for warrior of her background, particularly in controlled assessment environment rather than chaotic field conditions. Kakarot, Prince Vegeta indicated without transition. Central position. As Caulifla withdrew to observation status, Kakarot moved to the designated combat area. Unlike previous training sessions where he had moderated his performance to maintain appropriate hierarchical appearance, today's engagement carried different strategic considerations. With the tournament approaching, and Frieza's direct observation, Ion confirmed, calculated display of specific capabilities might serve longer-term objectives beyond immediate political caution. Kakarot activated his limitation field and settled into neutral stance. That revealed little of his intended approach. Unlike both Vegeta's traditional positioning and Caulifla's modified form, his starting configuration emphasized adaptability over commitment, readiness to respond rather than predetermined attack sequence. This fundamental philosophical difference reflected Bardock's years of specialized instruction. True combat advantage came not from superior Tekken IQ but from freedom to transcend technique itself when circumstances required. Your mission record suggests improved capabilities since our last assessment, Prince Vegeta noted with clinical detachment that disguised genuine curiosity. Demonstrate. The instruction carried layered meaning beyond simple combat initiation. Their periodic training sessions had established unusual dynamic, professional evaluation overlaid with unacknowledged recognition that both warriors pursued development paths that occasionally aligned despite vastly different positions within imperial hierarchy. This convergence, never explicitly discussed, created space for exchange beyond standard class limitations. As you wish, Kakarot acknowledged, then initiated engagement with approach entirely different from Caulifla's. Where she had emphasized disruptive movement patterns and angle manipulation, Kakarot employed precision economy that mirrored Vegeta's own style, but with crucial philosophical difference. While the prince's movements sought to impose will through perfect execution of established forms, Kakarot's similar-appearing approach concealed fundamentally different relationship with combat space. His techniques didn't seek to dominate environment but to harmonize with existing energy patterns, creating efficient pathways that required minimal force to achieve maximum effect. The distinct Ion proved immediately disconcerting to Vegeta, whose initial attacks encountered neither direct resistance nor evasive redirection, but something more unsettling, the sensation of striking empty space where opponents should logically exist. Kakarot's movements anticipated response patterns with uncanny precision, his positioning always slightly removed from expected interaction points without apparent defensive reaction time. Interesting, the prince acknowledged after 30 seconds of increasingly frustrated engagement attempts. Your predictive capabilities have improved. Rather than verbal response, Kakarot demonstrated application by transitioning to controlled offensive sequence, not attempting to overwhelm through power but systematically eliminating viable defense options through progressive position control. Each movement built upon previous exchange, creating cascading tactical advantage that resembled strategic game progression rather than typical combat escalation. Vegeta adapted with characteristic quickness, his elite training compensating for initial disorientation. The engagement intensified as both warriors abandoned preliminary assessment for serious tech HNICAL exchange, still within safety limitations but employing specialized techniques rarely displayed in standard training environments. From observation position, Caulifla tracked their interaction, with professional assessment overlaid with personal connection that had developed over 3 years of shared missions and private training. Unlike most observers who would see merely physical exchange between differently ranked warriors, she recognized the philosophical conversation occurring through combat, two fundamentally different approaches to power exploring respective boundaries and possibilities. After 5 minutes of escalating intensity, the engagement reached critical inflection point. Conventional combat metrics indicated approximate parity, unusual achievement against Royal Opponent. NT, but deeper analysis revealed distinct advantage emerging from Kakarot's energy efficiency. Where Vegeta expended power to impose technique, Kakarot directed existing environmental energy to accomplish equivalent results with minimal personal expenditure. The cumulative difference created sustainability advantage that would prove decisive in extended engagement. Prince Vegeta recognized this emerging reality with characteristic tactical clarity. Rather than continuing pattern that would lead to eventual resource depletion, he abruptly shifted approach, abandoning traditional Saiyan methodology for hybrid technique that incorporated elements suspiciously similar to what Kakarot himself had demonstrated in previous sessions. This adaptation, Elite Warrior incorporating lower-class Innovatio (NS), represented unprecedented development in their carefully maintained relationship. "You've been studying," Kakarot observed during momentary disengagement, the comment offering professional acknowledgement rather than hierarchical challenge. Effective approaches warrant consideration regardless of origin, the prince responded with careful neutrality that nonetheless contained significant philosophical concession. Coming from royal heir whose position demanded perpetual demonstration of superiority, this acknowledgement represented meaningful evolution beyond traditional class limitations. Their engagement resumed with renewed intensity, both fighters now employing hybrid techniques that transcended standard classification. Prince Vegeta maintained superior raw speed and power, but Kakarot's fundamental efficiency created sustainable advantage that gradually established positional dominance. As the scheduled time limit approached, outcome metrics indicated statistical advantage outside standard deviation parameters, clear performance superiority that contradicted hierarchical expectations. Commander Nappa, recognizing potential political complications from such result, signaled conclusion slightly before scheduled termination. Both warriors disengaged immediately, maintaining professional composure that disguised the unprecedented nature of their exchange. Performance metry CS reset before final calculations could be displayed, erasing official record of outcome while leaving personal knowledge intact for all participants. Acceptable demonstration of adaptation principles. Prince Vegeta assessed with deliberate understatement that maintained appropriate public narrative while acknowledging private reality. The tournament will require further refinement of energy conservation techniques under variable conditions. This seemingly clinical evaluation contained practical advice beyond formal assessment, indication that the upcoming competition would indeed emphasize efficiency over raw output. Confirming Bardock's strategic predictions. More significantly, it represented continuation of their unacknowledged information exchange, royal heir providing competitive on insights that wouldn't be available through standard briefing channels. "Your guidance is appreciated," Kakarot responded with appropriate deference that similarly disguised the actual exchange occurring beneath formal interaction. As they completed training session closure protocols, Prince Vegeta added seemingly casual observation that carried significant weight. "Lord Frieza has expressed personal interest in this tournament's outcomes. His representatives have emphasized identification of adaptable assets for specialized deployment rather than simple power assessment." The implied RNING was clear. Exceptional performance would attract attention from highest imperial levels, creating both opportunity and danger beyond standard career advancement considerations. For warriors like Kakarot and Caulifla, whose capabilities incorporated principles potentially threatening to imperial control mechanisms, such attention carried particular risk alongside professional benefits. "We will represent our respective training lineages appropriately," Kakarot acknowledged, the formal response containing acceptance of both the warning and its implications for performance calibration during the competition. With final protocols completed, Prince Vegeta departed alongside Commander Nappa, the massive training facility doors sealing behind them with hydraulic precision. Only when environmental sensors confirmed their complete withdrawal did Caulifla allow controlled release of tension that had maintained her professional composure. "That was unprecedented," she observed quietly. Huff excitement vibrated beneath controlled exterior. "You established clear advantage against the prince." "Temporary technical alignment," Kakarot corrected, maintaining caution despite surveillance-free verification. The next engagement would feature complete tactical adjustment from his side. "Obviously," she agreed with characteristic directness. "But that's not the significant observation. He incorporated your techniques." principles he previously dismissed as lower-class improvisation. That represents meaningful evolution beyond standard royal perspective. This assessment aligned with Kakarot's own evaluation, though political caution prevented explicit acknowledgement even in secure environment. Prince Vegeta's willingness to adapt, to incorporate approaches originated beyond light training circles, suggested philosophical flexibility that might eventually extend beyond combat techniques to broader questions of Saiyan purpose and imperial relationships. The tournament creates both opportunity and exposure risk, Kakarot noted, redirecting conversation toward practical considerations. Performance calibration will require precise calculation. Agreed, Caulifla responded, seamlessly transitioning to tactical discussion appropriate for potential monitoring despite security verification. Sufficient demonstration of capability to advance without attracting specialized attention. Particular caution during preliminary rounds where elimination would be inconsistent with established performance records. This professional assessment disguised personal reality they both recognized. The tournament represented exceptional opportunity to advance objectives beyond official competition parameters. Gathered participants would include promising warriors from across PLA, Net Vegeta's various training regions, potential connections for the network Bardock had been carefully cultivating for years. Frieza's representatives would provide direct observation of Imperial SS meant criteria normally hidden behind administrative layers. The unusual format would allow demonstration of specialized capabilities without immediately triggering suspicion typically associated with non-standard techniques. As they prepared to depart the Royal Training Facility, Kakarot's scouter activated with incoming communication from his father, precise timing that suggested Bardock's continuing ability to monitor developments through channels unknown even to his immediate family. Report to Residence Sector for tactical briefing, came the simple instruction, lacking any identificati. On that might connect communication to specific source if intercepted. Caulifla recognized the message significance without requiring explanation. I'll proceed with scheduled preparation activities. Communication through established channels if situation parameters change. This professional acknowledgement disguised deeper connection that had developed between them over 3 years of shared missions and private training. Unlike standard Saiyan relationships built on competition and hierarchical positioning, their partnership had evolved into something more complex, mutual respect founded on complementary capabilities and shared philosophical evolution beyond traditional Saiyan limitations. They separated at the facility exit, each taking different route back toward respective residence. Sectors, standard security protocol established by Bardock years earlier and now habitual for all connected to his gradually expanding network. As Kakarot navigated the capital city's winding pathways, he maintained constant environmental awareness while organizing observations from the training session for comprehensive reporting. The prince's performance had revealed significant technical evolution since their previous engagement 6 months earlier. His willingness to incorporate non-traditional approaches suggested growing recognition of limitations within standard Saiyan combat doctrine when faced with adaptive opponents. Most importantly, his oblique warning about Frieza's personal interest confirmed suspicions regarding the tournament's true purpose beyond public justification. Kakarot's arrival at the family dwelling coincided with Raditz's departure, his brother now 20 years old and established as respected squad leader within conventional deployment structure. Their relationship had evolved from childhood rivalry to professional respect, occasional missions together demonstrating complementary capabilities that transcended traditional sibling competition. Tournament preparation. Raditz inquired with practiced casualness that disguised genuine interest beneath standard Saiyan emotional restraint. Royal Facility Assessment, Kakarot confirmed, maintaining appropriately cryptic response in potentially monitored environment. Useful technical exchange. Raditz nodded understanding, then offered seemingly casual observation loaded with significance. Deploy. Meant briefing mentioned unusual observer assignments for competition. Multiple Imperial administrators beyond standard assessment teams. Frieza's personal guard captain among them. This information, delivered through officially sanctioned channels rather than Bardock's private networks, confirmed escalating Imperial interest in the tournament beyond normal talent identification procedures. Frieza's guard captain attended only events with strategic significance or security implications, suggesting classification beyond simple competitive exhibition. Appreciated, Kakarot acknowledged simply. The brothers maintaining public communication protocols while conveying substantive information beneath formal exchange. As Raditz departed for his scheduled deployment briefing, Kakarot proceeded in side where Bardock awaited in the secured communication chamber, a section of their dwelling modified with specialized technology that prevented standard surveillance penetration. The room's existence itself represented significant risk, as such modifications violated Imperial regulations regarding private communication capabilities. Report: Bardock instructed without preliminary exchange, his card face revealing nothing while his energy signature conveyed controlled urgency beneath professional exterior. Kakarot provided comprehensive assessment of the training session, emphasizing Prince Vegeta's technical adaptations. Implied warnings about Imperial observation, and performance metrics that established potential advantage contrary to hierarchical expectations. Throughout this detailed analysis, Bardock remained motionless, his attention focused on strategic implications beyond immediate tactical observations. The tournament format has been finalized, he informed Kakarot when the report concluded. 3 elimination rounds followed by championship bracket. Variable environmental conditions increasing with advancement. Power limitation protocols enforced until final stages. This structure confirmed earlier predictions. The competition would evaluate adaptability and technical precision rather than simple destructive capacity. Such format favored warriors with diverse field experience and innovative approaches over those with merely superior raw power, precisely the development path Bardock had established for Kakarot since childhood. Participant list includes representatives from all training regions, Bardock continued, activating secured data display that showed comprehensive competitor analysis. Approximately 60 qualified candidates between 14 and 16 years. Notable inclusions beyond expected elite selections. The display highlighted several participants whose profiles suggested unusual development patterns similar to Kakarot's own, RRIORS, whose mission records indicated tactical innovation and adaptation capabilities beyond standard Saiyan approaches. Their inclusion suggested purpose beyond simple talent identification. This tournament would evaluate specific qualities relevant to evolving Imperial needs. Prince Vegeta's participation creates political complexity, Bardock observed, highlighting the royal heir's position in competitive brackets. Traditional protocols would ensure his advancement regardless of performance metrics. Current format suggests actual evaluation against objective standards, unprecedented departure from hierarchical protection. This observation aligned with Kakarot's own assessment. Something had changed in Imperial priorities, creating a evaluation environment where even royal bloodline provided no automatic advantage. Such development carried significant implications for Saiyan's social structure beyond immediate competition considerations. Most concerning development, Bardock concluded, highlighting final tournament parameter, involves prize designation beyond standard recognition. Winners will receive specialized deployment assignments directly under Frieza's elite forces, REM. Oved from standard Saiyan command structure and integrated into Imperial Inner Circle. The implications were immediately clear. Warriors selected through this process would gain unprecedented access to Imperial command operations while losing connection to traditional Saiyan authority structures. From Frieza's perspective, this created loyal assets with exceptional capabilities directly under High's control rather than mediated through King Vegeta's administrative hierarchy. An identification and extraction operation, Kakarot assessed, recognizing the strategy from historical examples Bardock had included in his education. Identifying exceptional talents and removing them from potential rebellion contexts before they develop problematic loyalties. Precisely, Bardock confirmed, his expression revealing momentary pride in his son's analytical capabilities before returning to neutral assessment. This tournament represents opportunity and danger in equal measure. Performance suffix, INT to confirm documented capabilities without demonstrating exceptional characteristics that would warrant specialized attention. The directive was clear: advance far enough to maintain credible performance record while avoiding final selection that would result in direct Imperial assignment. This delicate calculation would require precise combat calibration throughout multiple rounds against diverse opponents under variable conditions. Complex challenge beyond standard tournament considerations. What about Caulifla? Kakarot asked, the question emerging from tactical assessment rather than personal consideration. Her capabilities may attract similar attention if fully demonstrated. Bardock's expression revealed nothing, though his energy signature acknowledged the legitimacy of this concern. She has been briefed through appropriate channels. Her family connections provide certain insulation from direct Imperial recruitment, but caution remains warranted. This confirmation Hat Khalifah had her own information sources beyond their direct communication represented significant evolution in Bardock's operational approach. Where earlier years had emphasized tight control of strategic information within immediate family circle, recent developments had necessitated broader network with distributed awareness, adaptation to expanding scope and complexity as resistance foundations gradually developed. Final preparation period begins tomorrow, Bardock concluded, deactivating the secured display. 3 days until preliminary rounds. Focus on energy conservation technique and environmental adaptation capabilities. I've arranged specialized training scenario at outpost facility to simulate variable conditions anticipated in competition format. The practical instructions concluded their briefing, transitioning from strategic assessment to tactical preparation appropriate for immediate objectives. As Kakarot prepared to depart for the designated training location, Bardock added final observation that transcended professional evaluation. Your development continues to exceed projected parameters, he noted with carefully moderated pride beneath Commander's assessment. The balance you've achieved between technical precision and philosophical adaptation represents exactly the integration needed for challenges beyond this tournament. Coming from Bardock, Ho's emotional restraint epitomized traditional Saiyan fatherhood. This acknowledgement carried weight beyond simple performance evaluation. It represented recognition of holistic development toward objectives that extended far beyond immediate competition, preparation for eventual challenges only glimpsed in his precognitive visions years earlier. I had effective instruction, Kakarot responded simply, maintaining appropriate Saiyan restraint while acknowledging the foundation Bardock had established through years of specialized training. With tactical briefing complete, Kakarot departed for the designated training facility, his mind organizing competition parameters alongside broader strategic considerations. The tournament represented immediate challenge requiring specific preparation, but its significance extended beyond competitive outcomes to larger questions of imperial intentions and potential resistance opportunities. As he navigated the capital city's winding pathways toward the transportation hub, Kakarot maintained constant environmental awareness, habit developed through years of operating within potentially monitored contexts. This ingrained caution detected subtle energy signature modifications in standard patrol patterns approximately 3 sectors from his intended route, unusual concentration of monitoring resources suggesting targeted surveillance rather than routine security operations. Without obvious direction change that might trigger observer attention, Kakarot modified his path to investigate this anomaly while maintaining appearance of normal transit activities. As he approached the sector in question, additional energy signatures became apparent, not the standard Saiyan patrol units that maintained capital security, but specialized personnel with unfamiliar power configurations suggesting off-world origin, maintaining casual movement patterns that provided observational opportunities without revealing specific interest. Kakarot identified the focus of this unusual security concentration, a commercial district building typically used for visiting dignitaries from allied worlds within Frieza's empire. The structure currently hosted Nickel delegation from Advanced Manufacturing Planet, standard Imperial resource exchange program that rarely warranted specialized security beyond routine protocols. What distinguished this otherwise unremarkable diplomatic function was specific personnel concentration around engineering section entrance, location where specialized equipment would be transferred between Imperial representatives and local technical administrators. The security configuration suggested asset protection beyond standard valuable technology parameters, indicating presence of something warranting exceptional measures. Most interesting was energy signature of central figure within security formation, non-Saiyan, female, with unusual power configuration suggesting specialized adaptations rather than natural combat capability. Her positioning indicated technical specialist status rather than security function, yet her personal energy control reflected advanced training beyond standard scientific personnel parameters. As Kakarot maintained observational position within normal pedestrian patterns, the security formation shifted to accommodate emergence of transport vehicle from secured area. The central figure, now visible as humanoid female with distinctive physical characteristics indicating origin from technological development world in outer imperial regions, supervised loading of specialized container W.I.T.H. personal attention unusual for diplomatic exchange protocols. What captured Kakarot's trained observation was her movement pattern, subtle but distinctive indicators of combat awareness integrated with technical precision. Unlike standard Imperial scientists who typically displayed either academic expertise or security training but rarely both, this individual demonstrated harmonized capability, i.e. suggesting specialized development beyond conventional Imperial categorization systems. When she momentarily glanced in his general direction, not specific identification but standard security SWE. EP of surrounding environment, Kakarot maintained perfect continuation of casual movement patterns while noting distinctive facial structure and unusual neural interface technology partially visible beneath her head covering. These characteristics suggested identity beyond random technical representative. Tanisa, renowned weapons development specialist whose innovations had been incorporated into recent Imperial conquest technologies. Her presence on planet Vegeta, particularly in conjunction with specialized security protocols and non-standard equipment transfer, represented significant intel. Legends beyond immediate tournament considerations. Bardock's information network had monitored her activities across several Imperial sectors, noting correlation between her technological deployments and subsequent military operations against resistance movements on conquered worlds. Without revealing specific interest that might trigger security response, Kakarot completed his observational CIR. Coot and continued toward originally designated transportation hub. The information would require transmission through secured channels rather than direct reporting, as any deviation from expected movement patterns might connect observation to specific observer, particularly dangerous with specialized security personnel operating outside standard Imperial protocols. As he proceeded toward the training facility, Kakarot integrated this unexpected intelligence with tournament preparation considerations. The presence of advanced weapons developer on planet Vegeta immediately preceding competition, with unusual Imperial interest suggested connection beyond coincidental timing. Whether the tournament itself incorporated technological innovations or served as distraction for other activities remained unclear. But correlation warranted careful attention alongside immediate competitive preparation. Upon reaching the designated training facility, remote outpost originally established for environmental adaptation conditioning, Kakarot found Caulifla already engaged in specialized preparation activities. The facility's modified gravity chambers had been programmed to simulate variable conditions anticipated in tournament formats, creating unpredictable environmental changes that required constant adaptation rather than simple power compensation. "You observed something," she noted immediately, her sensitivity to his energy patterns detecting the controlled alertness beneath casual exterior. Without pausing her adaptation sequences, she created conversation space that appeared as normal. Training communication while allowing substantive exchange. Technical delegation in commercial sector, Kakarot confirmed, initiating his own preparation sequence while establishing communication P. A turn that would appear as standard training dialogue to any monitoring systems. Specialized equipment transfer under non-standard security protocols. Notable personnel presence suggesting strategic significance beyond routine exchange parameters. Caulifla absorbed this information without visible reaction, maintaining perfect continuation of her training sequence while processing implications. Timing correlation with tournament preparations suggests potential connection. Implementation of specialized monitoring technology or testing of adaptation parameters under controlled conditions. This assessment aligned with Kakarot's own analysis. The tournament might serve dual purpose beyond talent identification, potentially incorporating evaluation of new technologies under combat conditions without participants' awareness. Such approach would align with known Imperial testing protocols where reaction to unknown variables provided valuable development data. Adaptation focus becomes even more relevant, Kakarot concluded, transitioning to intensive training sequence designed specifically for unpredictable environmental response. Performance parameters must accommodate potential unknown variables beyond announced conditions. Their preparation proceeded with intensified focus informed by this additional consideration, each warrior developing specialized techniques anticipating not just known tournament conditions but potential hidden variables beyond official parameters. The training facility's advanced simulation capabilities allowed recreation of diverse environmental challenges, variable gravity, atmospheric modification, temperature fluctuation, and energy field disruption, creating comprehensive preparation environment beyond standard competitive conditioning. As day transitioned to evening, additional participants arrived at the specialized facility, other qualified competitors who had secured access to advanced preparation resources through various connections. Among them were warriors from diverse training lineages across planet Vegeta, each bringing distinctive techniques and approaches developed through different instructional philosophies. This gathering represented rare opportunity for cross-pollination of combat methodologies typically isolated within separate training traditions. Most notable among arriving participants was Princess Echelot, her presence unexpected given her position outside the competition age parameters. As Science Division Liaison, however, her involvement in tournament preparation carried official justification through technical oversight responsibilities. Her arrival transformed the training environment from simple preparation facility to quasi-official gathering with potential political implications beyond immediate competitive considerations. Interesting adaptation approach, she observed upon witnessing Kakarot's environmental response techniques during momentary training pause. Her tone carried scientific assessment rather than royal condescension, continuing the professional relationship established during their Eridan deployment years earlier. Integration of biological responsiveness rather than simple power compensation. Principles derived from frontier world observations. The question contained acknowledgement of their shared experience beyond public record, recognition of Eridan's influence, CE without explicit reference that might attract unwanted attention from other participants. Princess Echelot's scientific orientation had always prioritized practical knowledge acquisition over political considerations, creating unusual alliance potential despite hierarchical separation. Environmental partnership rather than dominance, Kakarot confirmed with appropriately respectful terminology that nonetheless conveyed philosophical principle rather than simple technique description. Efficiency through adaptation rather than opposition. Something like approval flickered across her tip. Equally controlled expression, recognition of conceptual understanding beyond mechanical application. Unlike many royal family members whose interaction with lower-class warriors remained strictly hierarchical, Princess Echelot had consistently demonstrated evaluation based on intellectual substance rather than social classification. The tournament will feature several previously untested environmental modifications, she noted with deliberate casualness that disguised information transfer as simple conversation. Particularly interesting applications in the secondary elimination round. Atmos, pH-eric composition variables combined with energy disruption fields. This specific intelligence, provided outside official briefing channels, represented significant advantage for preparation purposes. More importantly, it confirmed Princess Echelot's continuing pattern of selective information sharing beyond strict hierarchical limitations, potential alliance indicator relevant to broader strategy. IC considerations beyond immediate competition. Appreciated perspective, Kakarot acknowledged with appropriate deference that disguised substantive exchange beneath formal interaction. Adaptation priorities will be adjusted accordingly. Quote, their conversation maintained this careful balance between official propriety and substantive communication, establishing information exchange framework that appeared as standard pre-competition interaction while conveying specific intelligence relevant to both immediate objectives and longer-term strategic considerations. Princess Echelot's willingness to provide such information, potentially contrary to official preparation equality protocols, suggested alignment possibilities beyond current hierarchical structures. As evening training session intensified, the facility's variable condition programming created increasingly demanding scenarios requiring diverse adaptation approaches. Each participant demonstrated specialized techniques developed to their particular training lineage, creating observation opportunities beyond standard combat assessment. Kakarot maintained comprehensive awareness of these demonstrations, cataloging capabilities and limitations for potential future reference beyond immediate competitive considerations. Most notable among displayed techniques were those employed by Caulifla, whose integration of principles from multiple planetary systems had created hybrid approach unlike traditional Saiyan methodologies. Her movements incorporated fluidity observed in Eridan's indigenous population, precision derived from advanced imperial combat forms, and foundational power characteristic of Saiyan heritage, combination that created extraordinary adaptation capability even by elite warrior standards. As primary training session concluded and participants transitioned to recovery protocols, Kakarot detected subtle energy signature fluctuation in facilities monitoring systems, patterns suggesting specialized observation beyond standard security parameters. Without revealing specific awareness, he modified his recovery sequence to investigate this anomaly while maintaining appearance of normal cool-down procedures. The source revealed itself through directional energy leakage characteristic of advanced surveillance technology, observation drones employing recently developed cloaking systems that masked visual presence but generated distinctive energy signature detectable by sensitive key perception. These devices, positioned at strategic monitoring points throughout the facility, represented surveillance beyond standard imperial protocols, suggesting specialized interest in participant capabilities from highest administrative levels. Most concerning was configuration patterns suggesting focus on specific individuals rather than general environment monitoring. The drone positioning created concentrated observation field around particular participants, including Kakarot, Caulifla, and 2 other RRIORS who had demonstrated unusual adaptation techniques during the session. This targeted surveillance confirmed tournament purpose beyond simple talent identification, specific capability assessment for particular imperial objectives. Without alerting others to this discovery, Kakarot completed his recovery procedures while maintaining casual movement patterns that revealed nothing of his awareness. The information would require transmission through secured channels rather than immediate discussion, as facility conditions couldn't guarantee communication privacy even during informal interaction. As participants prepared for departure, Princess Echelot approached Kakarot once more, her movement creating brief privacy window while appearing as standard administrative interaction. The preliminary brackets have been finalized, she informed him with official tone disguising information transfer. Your initial opponents present minimal technical challenge but significant political complexity. Exercise appropriate restraint while ensuring advancement. This specific intelligence, participant brackets weren't scheduled for official release until following day, represented significant preparation advantage. More importantly, her warning about political considerations confirmed tournament factors beyond simple combat assessment, suggesting performance calibration requirements aligned with Bardock's earlier directives. Understood, Kakarot acknowledged with appropriate formality. Performance parameters will reflect proper consideration of all relevant factors. Their exchange concluded with standard protocols appropriate for their respective positions, maintaining public appearance of proper hierarchical interaction while establishing information alliance beyond official structures. As Princess Echelot departed alongside her royal security detail, Kakarot detected momentary fluctuation in her controlled energy signature, indication of concern beneath professional exterior that suggested tournament implications beyond what even she had officially been informed. The training facility gradually emptied as participants returned to respective residential sectors for final preparation day before competition commencement. Kakarot and Caulifla, having arrived together, departed with similar coordination, maintaining appropriate professional distance in public observation contexts while establishing communication framework for private exchange once secure conditions could be confirmed. Their return journey through capital city outskirts provided necessary privac. Why for substantive discussion beyond monitoring parameters. Moving through rarely traveled maintenance corridors that connected infrastructure systems beneath primary transportation networks, they established communication security sufficient for direct exchange without technological surveillance risk. The drones employed phase shift technology consistent with recent developments from Sector 19. Kakarot observed once security verification was complete. Targeted surveillance rather than environmental monitoring, with specific focus on adaptation techniques rather than power output. Caulifla absorbed this assessment with characteristic efficiency, immediately integrating tactical implications with strategic considerations. Confirms specialized evaluation parameters beyond standard tournament objectives. Combined with Princess Echelot's atmospheric modification warning an unusual security presence around technical delegation, suggests comprehensive assessment operation rather than simple competitive event. Their shared analysis extended beyond immediate tactical considerations to broader strategic context, recognition that the tournament represented inflection point in Imperial evaluation approaches. Traditional Saiyan assessment had emphasized destructive capability and conquest efficiency. This new methodology suggested Imperial interest in adaptation, innovation, and specialized application potential, fundamental shift in evaluation criteria with significant implications for resistance planning. Performance calibration becomes increasingly complex, Khalifah noted, as they approached junction requiring separation for respective residential sectors. Sufficient demonstration for credible advancement while avoiding specialized attention from targeted surveillance. Precisely calculated restraint, Kakarot agreed, the technical terminology disguising deeper personal recognition of shared challenge beyond professional assessment. Particularly during preliminary rounds where power limitation protocols prevent distinction through raw output parameters. Their discussion concluded with practical coordination for final preparation day activities, establishing communication protocols and contingency parameters appropriate for tournament conditions. As they reached separation point requiring different routes toward respective residential areas, Khalifah paused momentarily. Her typically direct manner shifting toward rarely displayed uncertainty. This tournament changes established patterns, she observed, the statement extending beyond immediate competitive considerations to broader life trajectory implications. Outcomes will establish development pathways potentially divergent from previous alignment possibilities. The carefully phrased observation contained personal concern beneath professional assessment, recognition that their shared mission experiences and complementary development might be disrupted by tournament outcomes beyond their control. Imperial selection for specialized deployment would separate individuals from established networks, potentially redirecting life trajectories toward competing objectives despite personal preference alignments. Pathways may appear divergent while maintaining fundamental connectivity, Kakarot responded with equal care, balancing caution against genuine acknowledgement of concerns beyond tactical considerations. Established foundations remain relevant regardless of surface-level reassignments. This exchange, conducted with characteristic Saiyan emotional restraint while conveying deeper connection than typical warrior interaction, represented evolution in their relationship beyond professional cooperation. 3 years of shared missions, private training, and philosophical alignment had created partnership transcending standard Saiyan social structures, establishing connection vulnerable to disruption through Imperial intervention regardless of personal preferences. With pro-cetical arrangements confirmed and personal acknowledgements exchanged within appropriate security parameters, they separated toward respective residential sectors, each carrying comprehensive awareness of tournament implications beyond immediate competitive considerations. Whatever outcomes emerged from coming days would establish new parameters requiring adaptation beyond current preparation capabilities, continuing the evolution process that had defined their development since first deployment years earlier. As Kakarot completed final approach to family dwelling, he detected unusual energy nature indicating unexpected presence, controlled power level with distinctive fluctuation pattern suggesting specialized training beyond standard Saiyan military development. The signature's familiar configuration confirmed identity before visual confirmation. Zuki, childhood acquaintance whose medical aptitude had redirected her development away from standard warrior progression toward special IZED healing functions rarely valued in traditional Saiyan culture. She awaited near the dwelling's secondary entrance, position suggesting deliberate avoidance of primary access points where monitoring would be standard protocol. Her appearance had evolved since their last interaction several months earlier, traditional medical division uniform modified with practical adaptations indicating field deployment experience beyond standard healing center assignments. Most notable was energy configuration suggesting combat capability development alongside medical specialization, unusual combination rigidly categorized Saiyan professional structures. Your tournament preparation appears comprehensive, she observed as he approached, the casual greeting disguising purposeful interaction beneath social appearance. Though certain adaptation considerations may warrant specialized perspective beyond standard training parameters, The carefully constructed statement confirmed purpose beyond incidental encounter, specific information transfer requiring personal delivery rather than established communication channels. Zuki's position within medical division provided access to physiological data beyond combat assessment metrics, potentially including information relevant to tournament conditions unavailable through standard briefing protocols. Unexpected perspective is always valuable, Kakarot acknowledged, establishing continuation framework while maintaining appropriate caution regarding potential observation, particularly regarding environmental adaptation requirements. Zuki glanced toward secondary entrance, indicating preference for secured environment rather than public exchange. Once inside and beyond standard monitoring parameters, she activated personal scramble device, medical division technology designed for patient confidentiality that created limited privacy field against casual surveillance. The tournament environmental modifications include neurotransmitter disruption components. She informed him without preliminary exchange, professional efficiency replacing social interaction patterns. Atmospheric compounds designed to impact hypothalamic regulation during intense exertion. Effects include perception distortion, emotional amplification, and potential aggression enhancement beyond conscious control parameters. This intelligence, unavailable through standard briefing channels and apparently unknown even to Princess Echelot's scientific oversight, represented significant tactical consideration beyond physical adaptation requirements. UCH compounds suggested evaluation interest beyond combat capability assessment, potentially including psychological profiling under stress conditions and impulse control measurement relevant to specialized deployment considerations. Medical countermeasures, Kakarot inquired, immediately focusing on practical application rather than ethical implications that couldn't be addressed within current parameters. Limited options without detection risk, Zuki acknowledged, removing small container from secured pocket within her uniform. This compound establishes temporary blood-brain barrier otification that reduces neurochemical vulnerability without performance impact. Metabolizes completely within 12 hours, leaving no detectable residual markers. The offering represented significant risk for medical professional operating within Imperial oversight systems. Unauthorized performance modification contrary to evaluation protocols could trigger career termination or worse if discovered. That Zuki would accept such risk indicated relationship value beyond standard association parameters, suggesting alignment potential relevant to broader network development beyond immediate tournament considerations. Why? Kakarot asked simply, the direct question acknowledging both the risk and its significance within their limited historical connection. Zuki's expression revealed raw, emotional transparency beneath professional exterior, momentary glimpse of conviction typically concealed within sane social constraints. Because true healing extends beyond physical repair to systemic well-being. What's being built requires protection against deliberate destabilization, regardless of officially sanctioned parameters. The statement confirmed awareness beyond specific intel. Eigen's transfer, recognition of broader objectives that Bardock had been cultivating through carefully expanded network connections. Whether through direct recruitment or parallel development, Zuki H. had aligned with resistance potential against Imperial manipulation, offering specialized capabilities beyond standard warrior contributions. Appreciated, Kakarot acknowledged simply, accepting both the compound and its deeper significance within evolving resistance framework. The exchange represented another connection point in gradually expanding network, specialized capability integration ND combat orientation that would prove essential for challenges beyond immediate Imperial constraints. With practical intelligence transferred and alignment confirmed, Zuki departed with trajectory. Stick efficiency, maintaining appropriate movement patterns that would register as standard medical professional activity within monitoring systems. Her contribution represented evolution in resistance. Development beyond Bardock's initial combat-focused approach, incorporating diverse specializations necessary for comprehensive capability beyond simple opposition force. Alone in the secured environment, Kakarot examined the compound while organizing tournament preparation priorities informed by this new intelligence. The competition had evolved beyond simple talent identification to multi-layer assessment operation incorporating psychological profiling, adaptation evaluation, and specialized capability identification, comprehensive imperial sorting mechanism identifying assets for targeted development within Frieza's direct control structure. Navigation of this complex evaluation environment would require precise performance calibration beyond standard competition considerations. SUF. IC and capability demonstration to maintain credible advancement while avoiding identification as exceptional asset warranting extraction from established networks. The balance point had narrowed with each new intelligence component, creating increasingly complex calculation requirements for each tournament phase. As Kakarot completed final preparation protocols and initiated rest cycle necessary for optimal performance condition, he maintained awareness of broader strategic context beyond immediate competition parameters. Whatever specific outcomes emerged from coming days, the tournament presented significant assessment point in Imperial Saiyan relationships, potential inflection moment in gradually developing resistance framework that Bardock had been cultivating since his first vision years earlier. With this comprehensive awareness providing contextual framework for tactical decisions, Kakarot entered recovery state optimized for cognitive integration alongside physical regeneration. Tomorrow would commence the Tournament of Pride, ostensible celebration of Saiyan warrior development that concealed complex Imperial assessment operation beneath competitive structure. Navigati. On of its challenges would require everything his father's unorthodox training had prepared him for. Testing not just combat capability but strategic understanding beyond traditional Saiyan warrior development. Chapter 3 End. The End. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.